The end of the world has come, and the world is filled with bloodthirsty zombies who rush to attack. The main character was visited by a beautiful neighbor who began to reach for his neck. The man really didn't want to kill her, but he understood that it was too late. He didn't consider himself a superhero, but just an ordinary person trying to save the world. By killing zombies, his stats and strength increased. But the man felt increasingly lonely in this crazy world. But he still did not stop fighting evil. It all happened suddenly. People suddenly began to turn into soulless creatures. Every minute counted, and they had to save themselves in time. Zombies quickly began to fill the cities. Even in their own apartment, family members could become dangerous to each other. Friends were sitting as usual playing online games when strange sounds from one of the friends were heard in the headphones. The heroes thought that his friend was with the girl and asked him about it again. He laughed and said that it was true. He was now with his new girlfriend. And looking at the beauty, I noticed that she stopped and began to behave strangely. He asked her again what was wrong and asked her not to stop. Suddenly, he was overcome with horror when she raised her head. All that could be heard in the headphones were screams and pleas for help. But the friends still managed to finish the game and win, which made the team very happy. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It turned out to be a nice neighbor from upstairs. She begged to help her and let her in. The heroes, after thinking a little, agreed. The beauty was delighted and thanked him. She also added that she would not remain in debt and would do for the man whatever he wanted. Suddenly, there was a dull thud. The hero suddenly dealt a fatal blow to his neighbor as he noticed traces of infection. A moment later, the girl's headless body was already lying on the floor. A moment later, he is awarded 1 point for killing a potential zombie. The hero's name is Lint Font, and he is an ordinary interior designer. And just an hour ago, he was living in normal, calm life, until one neighbor attacked him like crazy and tore out his throat. And at the very moment when he was dying, a system for survival in the zombie world came. And the hero was reborn again, and now his name was Lin Fan. He was also given a personal profile, where he would be awarded points for killing zombies. Suddenly, strange sounds were heard from behind, and Lin headed there. There was a zombie near the girl's body. He ate his neighbor's corpse because it was still fresh. Seeing a living person, the zombie immediately attacked the hero with screams. But the man managed to decapitate it before it bit him. I also wanted to double-check the system to make sure points are actually awarded for killing zombies. Double-check your profile. Lin saw that he had been awarded 1 point for killing one zombie. Looking again at his neighbor's body, he realized that she would attract the attention of zombies, and he needed to come up with something. And the heroes decide to hide behind the door, and as soon as one of the zombies approaches the body, they immediately kill them. After some time, having killed a bunch of zombies, the man immediately received points. Returning back, Lin was in shock because the body was no longer in place. He frantically tried to understand where the body could have disappeared to, since it was unlikely that they would have had time to eat it. Looking around and seeing a mountain of dead zombies, the hero decides that it's not a good idea to leave them in the entrance. And as a decent resident of the house, he decides to clean everything up, because if he leaves it like that, it will soon start to stink. So the man decides to tie them all together and get rid of them. Having finished tying everyone up, Lin began dragging the corpses to the trash can. Suddenly, he heard strange sounds in the corridor. On the wall, he saw a strange shadow heading towards him. It turned out to be a zombie in a wheelchair. In this zombie, Lin recognized his neighbor, Uncle Zheng, from the second floor. When the zombie neighbor attacked Lin, he promptly cut off Zheng's head. He also thanked him for bringing a wheelchair, which would be very useful to him now. Now it will be much easier to drag zombie corpses than manually. Lin dragged the corpses one by one, and after a while, finally cleared the entrance of the creatures. Standing next to a trash can full of zombies, the hero caught himself thinking that he still couldn't believe that this was all true. He also thought that it wouldn't hurt for him to stock up on supplies somewhere. A moment later, he heard a voice from the neighboring balcony. This was the son of that very Uncle Joe. Lin always disliked this unpleasant parasite. One day this neighbor stole a bicycle, and Lin called the police on him. The bike was returned to him, but the neighbor then beat him up badly the next day. Therefore, Lin was not particularly happy to see this guy and grumbled at him, causing him to stare. The neighbor started to loudly explain from the balcony, and Lin forbade him to shout like that and attract attention. And then I thought, well, screw it, let the zombies eat it, it's no use anyway. Then the neighbor wrote his request on paper and showed Lin where he asked to bring him some food to chew. Lin unceremoniously sent this impudent guy away and let him find food for himself if he needed it. The neighbor started cursing in response, then decided that it was useless and he needed to outsmart Lin. And he showed a new poster, which said that if Lin obeyed him, he would stay alive. Because he knows where the secret base is, where they both will be safe. To this, Lin replied that the neighbor could chew on his own feces as food. The neighbor was angry, but he could not do anything, as he was too cowardly to go outside. Out of anger and despair, he simply threw empty plates at the hero and began to make noise and yell on purpose. The plates crashed down, but Lin remained unperturbed. Zombies immediately came running at this noise. The satisfied neighbor laughed out loud and said that Lin himself deserved it for his insolence. The zombie heads fell off their shoulders one by one. Meanwhile, the hero was awarded points for every zombie killed. The neighbor, watching how the heroes easily deal with a bunch of zombies, was shocked and could not understand when Lin managed to become so cool. Trying not to show his surprise, the neighbor yelled that he hadn't killed one zombie yet and was about to die. Lin grabbed the zombie and hoisted it onto his shoulders, then turned around and silently looked his neighbor straight in the eyes. And then he threw this zombie with all his might straight onto the neighbor's balcony. The neighbor ran away from the balcony cursing and yelled at the hero, asking what kind of nonsense he was doing, whether he had completely lost his mind. The zombie fell right into the neighbor's arms, who stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. Having calmly taken the bicycle, Lin went about his business, saying a sweet goodbye and wishing them a good conversation. On the way to get groceries, Lin killed a bunch of zombies and, going into the market, spoke with one zombie as a consultant. Heading towards the bike, the hero thought that these reserves would be enough for him for some time, and he could also grow them himself. However, something needs to be done with weapons, since one cleaver is not enough to fight zombies. Suddenly the hero was stopped by strange sounds and noise from behind. He turned around and saw a car driving straight towards him. I also saw a bunch of zombies that were attracted by this car. The car drove up to the hero and stopped next to him. The car's headlights were blinding his eyes, and Lin couldn't make out who was sitting there. A man and a woman were arguing in the car. The woman was yelling at the man, and they were arguing loudly. There was a child sitting in the back who was uncomfortable with the screams in the car, and he cowered, clutching his toy tighter. The child cried, hearing how the aunt in the car wanted her husband to get rid of this boy. The baby started calling for his parents and crying. The woman rudely shouted that his parents were dead, and if he didn't shut up, he would get into trouble. The woman suddenly grabbed the steering wheel and demanded that the car be stopped immediately. She wanted to punish the boy, and her husband tried to calm her down. Otherwise, it could have turned into a tragedy for everyone. The little boy watched in horror as the adults argued and snatched the steering wheel from each other. The boy burst into tears of despair and felt completely helpless. The car was thrown from side to side and was heading at full speed straight towards the truck. A moment later, the two cars collided with each other with a loud crash. Lin, noticing the consequences of the accident, slowly headed in that direction. On the way, a pompous man looked out of a large car and began to mock the hero. The man laughed and said that, unfortunately, there was no room for him in the car. Then he added with a grin that Lin would not need the place anytime soon anyway, since he would soon die. Lin didn't answer and just paused thoughtfully. He stood silently with a sword in his hands and listened to the driver's ridicule. At that moment, a guy in glasses approached the driver, trying to reason with him. He recalled the teacher's words that in difficult times people should help each other. The guy also said that the noise of their car attracted many zombies and put Lin in danger. Then the driver Huang suddenly pulled out a knife and cut the guy's throat. Huang declared that the end of the world had come and he could do whatever he wanted and no one could tell him what to do. Then Huang threw his passenger right onto the road like some kind of stray dog. After this, he stated that he had long been irritated by his moralizing. Then Huang laughed maliciously and declared that the bespectacled man could join Lin. After all, losers should stick together. After this, Huang stepped on the gas and drove on as if nothing had happened. In the side mirror, the driver saw only Lin's receding figure. As he drove away, Huang thought that Lin, with only a cleaver, looked like a complete fool against the zombies. Lin continued to stand silently in place and did nothing. At that moment he remembered an episode from his childhood. Then his mother stroked his head and said that he would grow up to be a brave, strong, and kind man. Here Lin turned around and raised the cleaver above his head. Then he threw it with all his might after the departing bus. The cleaver hit the tire directly, causing the car to lose stability. Huang lost control and crashed into a road sign with a loud noise. The bus overturned, crushing Huang under its weight. The man couldn't get out and desperately called for help. When Lin rode up to him on his bicycle, Huang began asking for forgiveness and help. Lin stopped and calmly apologized, saying there was no room for him on the bike. He also added that they were now even, and looked haughtily at the man, who was no longer so impudent. Lin was about to leave, but then he stopped and said that the man would soon receive help. There is not much time left, and his friend will also soon come to his aid. Huang shouted after the departing hero to no avail, while Lin rode calmly, humming a cheerful song. The man's screams brought zombies running to him, including the bespectacled man, whom he had treated cruelly. After a while, a whole horde of zombies surrounded the bus, and Huang's heartbreaking screams could be heard throughout the entire block. Lin calmly continued riding his bicycle about his business. After some time, the database was updated, and the system showed Lin his new characteristics and strength. While driving past one block, the heroes heard a woman's cry for help. The man raised his head and saw a woman asking him to stop. Looking closely, Lin also saw a child, and the woman was wondering to herself how he managed to survive. The heroes asked what she wanted, but thought to himself that they probably wanted food. When Lin went up to her, the woman immediately fell to her knees and begged for at least a drop of food. She begged to feed only her child and told him that her husband had died and they had not eaten anything for a long time. Lin handed the woman some zucchini and said he could sell them. The woman was shocked because now the money had no value, but if he wanted it, she was ready to pay. Suddenly, the hero's gaze was caught by an interesting object. He saw a cool sword on the wall of a woman's apartment. The heroine explained that her husband loved games and bought this sword as one from his favorite game. And then she handed the sword to the hero, saying that he could take it if he wanted, it would be a good weapon. Lin himself loved games and was delighted with the thing, and, without hiding his delight, asked again if the sword was really his. The woman smiled and said that she and her daughter would not use it anyway, but that Lin would find the sword useful. As he was leaving, Lin thanked them and left a phone number, saying that they could call at any time. The child, perplexed, told his mother that the man seemed strange, but the mother replied that he was no stranger than they themselves. Walking down the corridor, Lin couldn't stop admiring his new toy. He knew what game it was from. And he also imagined with a satisfied look how he would chop down zombies with it. And then he immediately took a liking to this case. He chopped up the zombie that rushed at him and thought that the sword was really much better than the cleaver he had. The heroes looked in bewilderment at the mad zombie that had appeared so suddenly. At that moment, some guy jumped out onto the balcony and started swearing. Then, he slowly lit a cigarette and regretted losing such a great girlfriend. Lin looked closely at the woman and saw that she had many wounds and abrasions. And I thought with pity that she had apparently endured inhuman torture during her life. And her look was full of horror and despair. The hero thought that his father had exactly the same look when his mother left him. Then he turned angrily to the man on the balcony and shouted what he was doing there. The man was surprised to see a living person on the street, and he shouted menacingly at Lin, demanding to know where he was from and what he was doing on his territory. He also added that the guy shouldn't meddle in other people's business. He'll have fun with whoever he wants. Hiding his new sword, Lin thought that with such a neighbor, the mother and daughter would definitely be in danger. So he squatted down and thought about what he could do for them. Lin lifted the body of the mutilated and exhausted zombie and counted the floors in his mind. The man from the balcony yelled what he was doing and why he needed this zombie. Then he suggested that Lin probably wanted to have some fun with her himself. Then he laughed and said that she was already dead and didn't resist, so it wouldn't be interesting with her. And when he came home, he added that Lin should quickly get out of his territory, otherwise he would regret it. The man, lounging on the sofa, took a can of beer and regretted that he had lost his toy for entertainment. While sipping cold beer, he thought about looking for some woman among the neighbors, and he was glad that now there was an apocalypse and he could do whatever he wanted with impunity. Suddenly there was a knock on the door and the man jumped up from the sofa. Taking the bat, he carefully approached the door, asking who else was knocking on his apartment door. The thought that it might be a zombie made him angry, because then he wouldn't be able to go out and find a woman. Looking through the peephole, he was stunned by what he saw. There was that same zombie. He lost his balance, stumbled back and fell, hitting his head. Lin's voice was heard behind the door, demanding that the door be opened, since he knew that the owner was inside. Hearing Lin's voice, the man sighed that it wasn't a zombie and calmed down a little. Then he turned to Lin, telling him, "You idiot, to get out of here." And then he decided to shout louder so that the zombies would hear and come to the sound and tear the uninvited gentleman to pieces. Before he could even scream, Lin broke down the door to his apartment. The man was shocked by the hero's strength, since the door was armored, and Lin easily broke it down. The man wondered with horror whether the person standing in front of him was a human being, but Lin looked at him calmly. After examining the apartment, Lin saw the place where the man had tortured the woman. Without thinking twice, the hero placed the woman's body near the closet. The owner of the apartment began to yell at him indignantly and demand that he remove the corpse from here. Lin turned to the man and said that she would witness the massacre of an insignificant piece. After some time, the heroes were at the police building on the street. Tied up with his own torture instruments and gagged, the man mumbled, trying to understand what they were going to do to him. Lin calmly replied that he was taking him to the police because that was how criminals were treated. The man seriously tried to explain to the hero that he had gone crazy and was unaware that there was a zombie apocalypse going on. Lin replied that he was aware of the events and pulled the man harder. The man was indignant that if he knew what he was doing, what was the point of this morality? Lin then slapped the criminal hard and said that this was no reason to behave like an inhuman being. Then he threw the man into the police building with all his might, causing him to break his head through the door. Whining in pain, the man wondered where this guy got so much strength to break down the armored door and throw him. When Lin approached, the criminal began to swear at him, asking why he brought him here. There is no point, since the building has been empty for a long time and no one will put him in jail or punish him. Lin laughed and said contentedly that it was not as empty as the criminal thought. The man screamed in surprise, horrified at the thought of who might be there. A moment later, a horde of frenzied and wildly hungry zombies emerged from the darkness. The next day, an armored jeep stopped near the city library. People got out of the car and talked among themselves about not making noise and being careful. They then approached the driver, Lao Mao, and asked him to wait for their return. The driver told the friends not to worry and promised to wait for them there. The woman who was the boss of the group reminded them that they only needed to find medical books in the library. The men carefully approached the central entrance of the library and opened the door slightly. Having decided that there was no one inside, the heroes were about to enter the library. Suddenly the woman heard something and quickly pulled out her weapon. The men were surprised and said that they had checked the premises and everything was calm inside. The second man approached the manager and said that she was being too cautious. The woman quickly opened the library doors and ordered the men to talk less and act more. Suddenly Lin appeared in front of the heroes, smiled sweetly, and calmly said hello. The heroes were shocked by his unexpected appearance. One of the men fell to the floor and muttered in fear that the zombies had started talking. Lin calmly began to reassure the guests and explained that he was a living person. However, the group continued to warily demand to know who he was and what he was doing there. Lin took out a book, showed it to the guest, and said that he was simply reading in the library, as is customary here. One of the men turned to the commander and said that she had asked a stupid question. The woman rudely ordered her subordinate to shut his mouth. The commander then turned to Lin and said that they had also come for books, apologizing for the disturbance. Lin calmly waved his hand and joked that everything was fine and the main thing was to keep quiet in the library. Watching Lin leave, one of the men noticed a familiar sword behind his back. He said that the sword was from an online game and thought that Lin must be crazy to use it. The second man suggested that it might be a trap and urged everyone to be careful. The woman quietly told her subordinates that they needed to speak more quietly and remain vigilant. While sorting through the medical books, the commander kept her eyes on Lin. She felt uneasy and thought that they had better get out of here as soon as possible. When her subordinates approached, the woman said that it was time for them to leave. Seeing the guests heading towards the exit, Lin suddenly called out to them. All the heroes worried that the stranger was going to attack them. But Lin surprised everyone by saying that it was impossible to take out so many books without registration. He also added that the books were shared and were issued only after registration. The heroes listened in bewilderment. The guests were dumbfounded and began to whisper among themselves that he was probably mentally ill. The woman then asked Lin if he knew what was going on in the world at all. The commander thought to herself that she had been worried for good reason, because this man was clearly not normal. Continuing to read the book, Lin calmly replied that he knew about the end of the world and the zombie invasion, if that's what they meant. The commander just looked at Lin in amazement, not knowing what to answer. One of the men told Lin that it was the end of the world outside, and he was thinking about registering the books. Then the guest added that it would be better for them to disperse peacefully, since they had already found the books they needed. Lin calmly raised his head, smiled, and said that he had approached them only with good intentions. He then introduced himself as Lin Fan, gave his address, and offered to contact him in case of danger. The guests were shocked and finally decided that there was definitely something wrong with his head. Thinking that he was a real psycho, the guests grabbed each other's hands and ran quickly to the exit, thanking him for his help. Lin looked at the guests with bewilderment and wondered why they left so quickly without even introducing themselves. Then he waved them off and sat down again to study his new agricultural skills. Lin realized that by mastering agriculture, he would be able to grow his own food. Meanwhile, the action moved to an underground base in the middle of the desert. There, scientists were actively conducting experiments on zombies. During their research, they discovered that the activity of zombie cells was increasing every day. While observing the lab technicians, one of the managers asked if it was possible to create antibodies to the virus. The professor suggested that this was impossible, since the virus was completely new. The professor then asked if the supervisor had heard of the so-called zombie gene. The man tensely asked if he meant to say that zombies actually continue to live, but in a different form. Lin walked along the deserted street and thought that he had almost completely mastered the basics of growing plants. He also found a vacant lot next to his house for a future vegetable garden. Approaching this place, Lin carefully examined it and assessed it. Then he asked loudly if there was anyone alive in the house. Lin introduced himself and said that he wanted to plant a vegetable garden here, if no one objected. The zombies immediately came running to his voice, clearly unhappy with such a neighborhood. Lin began to chop down the zombies one by one. However, the zombies did not become less numerous, and they surrounded the hero in a tight ring. But Lin quickly dealt with each opponent. For every zombie killed, new points were immediately added to his profile. Having finished with everyone, Lin breathed a sigh of relief and was glad that now no one would interfere with his garden. Then he asked again loudly if anyone had any objections to his garden. There was silence in response, and Lin was even somewhat glad that since there was no one around, no one would steal his vegetables. Suddenly Lin felt very hungry and realized that he had not eaten anything for a long time. Then he decided that it was time to have something to eat and at the same time visit his familiar mother and daughter. After some time, Lin was already having dinner in the apartment of his new acquaintances. He brought some food and the woman thanked him sincerely. The woman felt awkward because she could not repay Lin in any way for his help. However, she asked him for one thing. If something happened to her, she was worried about her daughter. Lin looked at the woman in surprise and asked how he could help. The woman looked at Lin with excitement and wondered if he would agree to her request. Then she honestly admitted that she wanted to leave here with him and her daughter. Lin happily decided that she wanted to be his neighbor and said that there were inexpensive apartments nearby. He also added that he knows an agency that will help find housing. The woman was shocked by this answer and thought what nonsense he was talking about. Meanwhile, there was a group of people on the roof of a high-rise building. Suddenly one of them's phone rang. The man was surprised by the late call and hopefully thought that maybe it was the rescuers. He picked up the phone and began to listen attentively. On the other end of the line, they asked Mr. Chen if one apartment was available and whether it could be rented. Chen hung up and said indignantly that some idiot had decided to play a joke on him. He thought to himself, could it be that the man didn't see what was going on around him? Chen sat down on the floor and thought that only the strict security system of their elite complex saved them from the zombies. As Chen scrolled through his phone, he thought that they had been waiting for rescuers on the roof for several days. Suddenly the phone rang again and the same number appeared. The man responded irritably and yelled at what kind of sick idiot was calling him. But they calmly replied on the phone that they just wanted to rent an apartment. Chen hung up again without answering. Lin sighed and reassured the woman, saying that people were becoming very nervous these days. Then he added that he would call again about the apartment. Lin then called Mr. Chen again, but he immediately started shouting, cursing, and insulting him. Lin, completely bewildered, continued to explain that he simply wanted to rent an apartment. Realizing he was talking to a lunatic, Chen blurted out that he would rent him an apartment. He then shouted that he was on the roof of an elite complex and that Lin should come right now. Lin stood up happily and told the girls that the agent had agreed to arrange the lease for them. The hero ran out of the apartment so quickly that the woman did not have time to answer him. Then one of Chen's colleagues approached him and asked what had happened and why he was so irritated. Chen replied that some idiot had just called him and pestered him about rent. The colleague asked me to ignore the nonsense and said that he wanted to have a serious talk in private. He quietly announced that there were only enough food supplies for half a month at most. The man also added that there are too many old people among them who have become a burden. But Chen objected that it was impossible to do this openly, since the elderly couple had once shared food with them. The colleague calmly replied that he would deal with the problem himself. Then he added that after the old people, he would deal with the men, and he would also kill the ugly women. After these words, the men began to look at the women who were next to them. The men's eyes lit up as they looked at the beauties they would keep alive for themselves, and one of them added that he wouldn't mind having some good fun during the apocalypse. Meanwhile, Lin quickly mounted his bicycle and rushed towards the agent. On the way, zombies joined him, and the hero joked about how slow they were. In the empty streets, more and more zombies joined Lin, creating a loud noise. Hearing the roar, people looked out of their houses and looked in shock at the daredevil on the bicycle. They were sure that the poor fellow had very little time left to live. But this didn't stop Lin at all. The hero finally arrived at his destination and saw a luxury residential complex. Looking back, the man wondered where all the zombies had disappeared to and thought how slow they were. Meanwhile, on the roof of the house, the men began their ruthless plan and gathered people around them. They declared that they had a plan of salvation and that the others should listen to them. The old men spoke anxiously among themselves that supplies were becoming increasingly scarce and were becoming a burden. The man reassured his wife, saying that they had lived a happy life, and now it was the turn of the young couple. The wife just smiled at her husband and humbly agreed with him. Then another elderly man, who had overheard their conversation, approached Old Man Van. The old man asked Joe, because he also thought that they had become a burden to the young. Joe agreed and said that he did not blame the young people because the future belonged to them. Then Joe's wife Liang came up to him and said that he needed to be patient a little longer. The husband silently agreed with her words, since arguing with his wife was useless. The men convinced the others to follow their plan and were pleased with the result. Xiao Xiao thought to himself that he would first get rid of the old men and then deal with the young men. He then cunningly plotted to kill his friend Chen later, keeping all the food and women for himself. One of the old men approached the men and said that they had heard their entire conversation. Approaching the men, Old Man Van said that he understood everything and did not want to be a burden to them. He added that their elders should not be killed or thrown down, but rather that it would be better to simply disperse. One of the girls said anxiously that no one should be allowed out, otherwise zombies would get in through the emergency door. The rest of the people unanimously supported her words. In a panic, they began to say that for everyone's safety, it would be better to throw the old people down. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door leading to the roof and asked for Agent Chen. The men were confused and could not understand who had come. The voice behind the door added that he had recently called about renting an apartment and had come in person. Then Chen remembered the persistent subscriber and shouted in rage, asking what kind of crazy person had come to rent an apartment. The door was not open for a long time, so the guest began to knock harder, and soon it flew out. The door fell with a bang, and Lin appeared in front of the people. He politely apologized for the broken door and said he didn't know how fragile it was. Here Xiao suggested to his colleague to play along with the guest so that he would leave sooner. He then added that after that, they would calmly deal with the old people. Chen smiled maliciously and praised his friend for such an idea. Then Chen stepped forward and said that he was the apartment rental agent and was willing to help. He added that he would rent out the apartment if Lin left immediately. Then Lin handed the agent the money and said that it was a deposit and he promised to transfer the rest of the amount later. Looking at the guest, Chen became increasingly convinced that he was completely abnormal. Chen played along with the guy, took the money, and promised to arrange everything and asked Lin to leave quickly. Lin politely thanked the agent and headed for the exit. Suddenly he stopped and asked an old man if his name was Zhou Aijun. The old man was surprised and asked how the boy knew him. Lin ran up to the man, hugged him, and said that he had seen him on TV. He also admired his heroic deeds and bravery during military operations. The old man replied sheepishly that all this was long ago in the past. Lin then addressed everyone and said that it was very dangerous outside right now. The old people replied that there was almost no food left, so they decided to leave themselves for the sake of the young people. They explained that they had already lived their lives, and now it was the turn of the young. Lin listened to their conversation with caution and understood that he didn't like the situation at all, that something was wrong here. The men tensed up under the guest's gaze and felt uneasy. Then Lin turned to the old men and offered to go with him, promising a safe place and protection. The old men thanked him for his kindness, but refused, not wanting to be a burden. Lin smiled shyly and said that he was strong enough to protect everyone. He then invited them to live in his residential complex and promised to help them rent an apartment. Everyone looked at Lin in surprise, not understanding why he was talking about rent during the apocalypse. The hero decisively took the old men by the hands and led them to the exit, as if he had already decided everything for them. Here Chen wanted to stop everyone and took a step forward, but his friend Xiao immediately stopped him and said that it was even better for them this way. Chen turned to his friend in surprise and looked at him questioningly. Sai explained that everything turned out even better than they expected, because the old people leave on their own, there is no need to kill them. Xiao also came up with another brilliant idea. When they go down, they will attract the zombies with their noise, and in one go, they will get rid of both the old people and the crazy guy. As soon as the heroes went outside, various objects flew from the roof, creating a loud noise. People looked up and saw that the objects were being thrown by the men who remained on the roof. After waiting for the old men to leave, the men began to deliberately create noise to attract the zombies. The old people were shocked by such cruelty and the fact that they were wished death, even after they themselves had left there. Lin interrupted them and said that these people were much worse than they seemed and had something even more cruel planned. The old men looked at Lin in surprise and immediately understood everything. They realized that the noise was not for their benefit, but to attract zombies. Suddenly, one of the old men noticed something strange and turned to the others. He asked everyone to look at the huge number of dead zombies around. Then others began to speculate that someone might have created an anti-zombie cure. A lively discussion began among the people, but one of the old men did not believe in a cure for zombies. The women also tried to understand what had happened and made their own guesses. Suddenly, the old men realized something and simultaneously looked at Lin, who was behaving very quietly. The old people were shocked that one man could destroy an entire army of zombies. Meanwhile, the men on the roof did not understand why everything around was still so quiet. One of them noticed that the zombies below were lying motionless. At this point, an irritated Chen ran to the edge of the roof to see everything with his own eyes. He was shocked by what he saw and could not believe his eyes. Suddenly, Xiao grabbed one of the men and threw him off the roof. The others surrounded Xiao in bewilderment and demanded an explanation. Xiao calmly replied that since the noise didn't attract the zombies, it meant that live bait was needed. Suddenly, the men realized Xiao's brilliant idea and began to praise him for his sharp mind. At this time, the body of one of the men, thrown from the roof, fell next to the old people. The smell of fresh blood immediately attracted zombies. The men on the roof watched with dispassion as crowds of zombies surrounded the people. They were looking forward to the screams and the bloody massacre. The old people were terrified and did not understand what to do and thought that everything was over. Suddenly, Lin calmly asked if anyone had a car. One of the old men replied that his car was parked in a garage nearby. Lin was delighted and said that this was great news because there weren't enough bicycles for everyone. Then he suddenly ran to the side, shouting to the others to quickly go to the car and wait for him there. He would be back soon. The old men tried to stop the boy, fearing that they would be left without his help. But Lin had already run far away, and then the old men obediently decided to follow his plan. A moment later, the hero found himself in front of an army of enraged zombies. He started joking that they looked a bit too weak today. Even in front of a crowd of zombies, Lin remained calm and continued to joke. The men on the roof didn't understand why he was walking alone towards the zombies and what he was going to do. Xiao coldly stated that the guy had simply gone completely crazy. Here Chen happily told his friend that he was right, because the guy himself opened the gate where the zombies were. The men watched in bewilderment as Lin opened the gate and ran away. Xiao chuckled and said that the guy had no instinct for self-preservation at all. But suddenly, a moment later, he himself turned pale and looked at Chen with alarm. He said with alarm that this crazy person was running in a very strange direction. The men looked at each other and realized with horror that Lin was leading the zombie straight towards them. A huge crowd of zombies rushed after the guy straight towards the building. After some time, Lin appeared on the roof in front of the men. He greeted them cheerfully and said that since they wanted to attract the zombies themselves, he decided to help them a little. A moment later, a huge crowd of bloodthirsty monsters burst onto the roof. The men screamed in horror and did not know where to run. After some time, the heroes were already sitting together at dinner. Everyone was having dinner at the mother and child's house, and the woman thanked Lin for his care and food. The old people also sincerely thanked the guy for saving their lives. Then little Fei Fei noticed that Lin was staring at her and asked embarrassedly, why? Unexpectedly for everyone, Lin asked the girl where her backpack was. Fei Fei was surprised, did not understand what backpack they were talking about, and asked for an explanation. Lin introduced Grandma Liang and said that she was a former teacher. He then added that it was time for Fei Fei to study, and he would bring his backpack and textbooks later himself. Then the little girl tearfully asked her mother if she would really have to study even during the end of the world. The mother patted her daughter on the head and said that it was a good and useful idea. Fei Fei burst into tears and complained that she didn't want to study and that her uncle and mother were bad. Everyone at the table burst into laughter, and the house was once again filled with warmth and homely bustle. After a while, Lin got up from the table and asked to continue dinner without him. He said he had to take out the trash and find textbooks for Fei Fei. Only after Fei Fei had calmed down did she burst into tears again and ask why her uncle didn't like her. Meanwhile, zombies roamed the city streets in search of new prey. Suddenly they started shooting at them with bows and hitting the target accurately. The archer told his friends that almost all the zombies on the nearby streets had already been destroyed. He added that there were still zombies left in the buildings, and it would be more difficult to deal with them. The commander ordered everyone to rest for now and said that there would be enough food for about a week. She also noted that the water is still fine. The woman assumed that someone was maintaining the water station. Suddenly, the archer noticed something strange and exclaimed in surprise. Explosions suddenly began to ring out on the streets filled with zombies. The heroes immediately ran to the window to see what was happening. Suddenly, a girl's scream was heard from the street, calling for help. Suddenly, among the other zombies, a very strange mutant appeared. He was much bigger, stronger, and more aggressive than the others. The commander suggested that this was a mutated zombie, meaning they were capable of evolution. She realized that in that case, humanity was in even greater danger. The woman then heard a noise on the next street and assumed there was another mutant there. It was Lin who rolled the trash can right into the giant zombie and apologized for his clumsiness. All the zombies immediately rushed after him. Here the woman recognized the strange guy as the same eccentric from the library. The archer exclaimed, "Did this guy really decide to become zombie bait?" The other man replied that it was true, but he had taken the monsters away and saved them. As Lin passed the supermarket, he heard strange sounds, but decided to go on to get his backpack and textbooks. Suddenly, voices were heard from within the building, and Lin began to peer closely. On one of the floors, there was a group of guys who arrogantly asked who he was and what he was doing. Lin calmly replied that he was simply throwing out trash and didn't see anything strange about it. The guys started laughing at him for throwing out trash during the apocalypse. Lin was surprised and asked what was funny about it, then offered to help take out their trash if they needed help. One of the men responded irritably that it was the end of the world and they were doing whatever they wanted, having fun and enjoying themselves. He then rudely ordered Lin to get lost. The hero calmly turned around and said goodbye to the guys. The boys took this as disrespect and decided to call in zombies to punish the stranger. A moment later, they all started shouting and making noise, hoping to attract the monsters. But there was silence all around, and not a single zombie appeared. The hooligans looked at each other in confusion, not understanding where all the zombies had disappeared to. There were always plenty of them. At this point, Lin calmly turned around and asked them not to worry. As he entered the building, he added that the zombies were already on their way and would be here soon, so the guys didn't have long to wait. The boys didn't understand his words and started whispering among themselves. Suddenly, everyone felt a strong tremor coming from the ground. They began to look around anxiously, trying to understand what was happening. A moment later, a huge mutant zombie appeared in the window. Lin watched calmly as the monster destroyed the building, trying to get to the boys. Suddenly, he heard strange sounds and turned around. The sound of a baby crying could be heard from the bookstore. Without wasting a minute, Lin went inside, not believing that there could be a child there. Entering the room, he saw a terrible picture. A hanged woman, a young mother, was hanging from a rope. A crying child hung on her chest. Lin couldn't believe his eyes and tried to understand why his mother did this. The man immediately approached the woman and carefully removed the baby. The child cried nonstop, and Lin tried to calm him down as best he could. Then Lin noticed a notebook next to the child and picked it up. It turned out to be a diary in which the woman wrote about her hopeless situation, that she had run out of food and strength. She understood that she would no longer be able to take care of the child. The woman was also afraid of turning into a zombie and harming her own daughter, so she decided to take a desperate action to protect the child. Before this, the woman pulled out all her teeth and taped her mouth shut, but despair still pushed her to suicide. Before her death, she wrote that she was doing this to save her child. In the note, the woman said that the baby's name was Meng Meng and asked to take care of her. After reading the diary, Lin promised that he would definitely save the girl. Suddenly, a basketball rolled into the room. Lin looked in his direction in surprise, not understanding who could have thrown him. A moment later, a zombie burst into the room like lightning. In all his time, Lin had never encountered such a fast monster. Taking out his sword, the man wondered why the zombie hadn't touched the child yet. Lin then suggested that the monster must have used the baby as bait. But there was no time left for reflection, and it was necessary to defend ourselves. The monster moved lightning fast towards the hero and the little girl. A moment later, Lin cut the monster in half and killed it. But the hero was worried that he had never encountered such fast and smart zombies before. He assumed that there were a lot of books in the house, and perhaps this monster had read a lot of them. Also, a strange object, like a crystal, was visible from the monster's head. Lin himself was surprised by his thoughts and could not imagine that there were any guidelines for zombies. Seeing the bookcase, Lin took out some books for little Fei Fei. He decided that they would help her in her studies and would make her very happy. Meanwhile, the action moved to the desert, to a secret underground base. One of the professors looked with surprise at the discovery in the brain of a mutated zombie. The female scientist explained that the monster seemed unusual to them, so they examined its body more closely. The professor was intrigued and asked to tell him more. The girl said that the sniper, seeing the monster, immediately hit the monster in the head. But then something very strange happened. The zombie did not die and continued to move rapidly towards the base. The first shot seemed to do him no harm at all. Then the sniper shot him straight in the head several more times. Only after the head was completely destroyed did the zombie's body finally collapse. The girl recalled that previously, any shot to the head would immediately kill any zombie. But this time, everything happened differently. The professor continued her thought and said that zombies might actually evolve. They become stronger and more difficult to destroy. The professor also noted with concern that only 2 military bases are currently in contact, and he added with regret that humanity may no longer be saved. Here the girl interrupted the professor and said sheepishly that she had come up with a strange theory. The professor noticed her confusion and asked her to explain everything calmly. The girl admitted that she used to love reading books about zombies. It said that there were evolution crystals in the heads of zombies. She added that a person who kills a zombie and receives such a crystal becomes a superhuman. The professor looked at the girl in bewilderment, not understanding whether she was seriously talking about children's comics. One pastry blogger, looking out the window, suddenly noticed strange movement on the street. She suddenly saw a young man who was calmly walking during this terrible time. Suddenly, the man unexpectedly turned his head and looked straight at the girl. The blogger immediately jumped back from the window and covered her mouth to keep from screaming. She was afraid that the man noticed her because she didn't know what to expect from him. It was blogger Su Xiaoxiao, who worked as a pastry chef. Lin thought to himself that there seemed to be some survivors left in the city. Then he heard strange sounds, became alert and stopped. A jeep stopped near the police building. They were criminals from the city of Huan. One of the leaders reminded the gang that they needed to act quickly and leave immediately. Suddenly, the men turned around, noticing a stranger who was waving his hand at them in a friendly manner. Lin thought to himself that these people smelled of blood. One of the bandits was shocked that some guy was walking down a street full of zombies. The second bandit offered to kill this cheerful daredevil. Another man reminded them that they had come here on business and had to complete a task. The others supported him because the boss would punish them for failing the task. One bandit remained in the car and kept a close eye on Lin. He thought to himself that he would then tie this daredevil to the bumper and have some fun. Suddenly, in a second, Lin appeared right in front of the driver, scaring him greatly. Lin laughed and asked what he was so afraid of. He added that he simply came over to say hello and find out what they were doing there. The man anxiously wondered how the guy had managed to appear nearby so quickly. By this time, the rest of the bandits approached the car and began asking Lin various questions. The driver asked his friends in surprise why they returned so quickly and whether they had found what the boss had asked for. The remaining bandits replied that they had found everything and that was why they had returned. Throwing full bags into the car, they said that now they would live in luxury. One of the bandits told Lin that he had nerves of steel since he wandered the streets alone and how he was still alive. Lin calmly replied that he first checks the zombies for intelligence and then chops them down with his sword. The man looked at Lin with indignation and thought that the guy looked like a madman. Here, one of the bandits unexpectedly pointed a gun at the hero. Then, with a grin, he asked the merry fellow if he knew what he had in his hands. Lin calmly replied that he now understood why they had gone to the police station. Lin then said that stealing was not good, meaning that the bandits had stolen weapons from the station. The bandit became indignant and said that it was the end of the world and everyone was saving themselves as best they could. Pointing the gun at Lin's face, the man asked why he wasn't afraid and didn't beg for mercy. At that moment, Lin drew his sword and cut off the man's hand with one blow. The thug didn't even have time to react and only looked in horror at his falling hand. Lin calmly apologized and said that it was his automatic reaction after fighting zombies. One of the criminals immediately took out a gun and began threatening the guy. But a second later, the hero's sword cut him in half. The other men looked at this in horror and did not understand how it all happened. They did not have time to blink. Then the driver got out of the car cursing and asked why everyone was making so much noise. Zombies were going to come running at any moment. Then he ordered the others to quickly jump into the car. A moment later, a crowd of hungry zombies was already running towards them. But the driver drove away in fear, without even waiting for his friends. He also shouted after Lin that he remembered him and would definitely find him one day. The remaining criminals shouted after the driver and showered him with curses for betrayal and cowardice. The crowd of zombies gradually tightened the ring around them, leaving no way to escape. Lin calmly told the men that even zombies could not calmly watch their crimes. The men shouted indignantly that the zombies had come running because of the screams after Lin had chopped up their friends. A moment later, Lin jumped onto the roof of the building and said that justice always comes to the guilty. The men were shocked by how high he had jumped and by the hopelessness of their situation. A moment later, Lin and the baby were already safe on the roof of the building. The men began to be surrounded by frenzied zombies, which began to bite into their flesh. They screamed and begged for help, but it was already impossible to help them. Hearing screams and noise, the blogger went to the window to see what was happening on the street. The girl walked to the window, thinking about the stranger and assuming that he was attacked by zombies. She tried to see what was happening, but because of the crowd of zombies, nothing could be seen. The blogger had already decided that the zombies had torn the guy to pieces when suddenly Lin's satisfied face appeared at her window. The girl stepped back in fear and fell to the floor, not understanding how he ended up on the second floor. Seeing the girl's fear, Lin decided to act carefully and not frighten her even more. Below, the zombies tried unsuccessfully to reach the hero. Then Lin came up with an interesting idea on how to win the girl over. He decided to come to her window every day and simply smile at her in a friendly manner and, over time, win her over. The girl was terrified that her hiding place had now been exposed and did not know what to do. She took up the knife, thinking that the stranger might tell others where she was hiding. The blogger decided to kill him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Then, as a last resort, she thought that she would rather kill herself than become prey to monsters. At this time, the bandit's driver hurried to his boss to tell him what had happened. He burst into the boss's house shouting that everything had gone wrong. The boss, nicknamed Mad Wolf, aka Wang Dafu, demanded to know what happened. The driver fell to his knees and told how they reached the site and met the stranger and a group of survivors. He said that a group of survivors had deliberately attracted zombies to them, and he was the only one who survived. The driver then made up that he was trying to save his friends, but there were too many zombies. He also lied that they were attacked by a whole group of people, and not just one guy, so as not to look like a coward and a weakling. The driver looked at the silent boss with fear, not understanding what he was planning. The Mad Wolf was a very strong and cruel man who could break dozens of bricks with one hand. Here the boss put out his cigarette on the driver's forehead and asked why he survived and how it happened. The man endured the pain with all his might, afraid of angering his boss even more. He replied that he simply survived in order to continue serving his boss. The boss kicked him and angrily ordered him to get out of the office. Left alone, Mad Wolf thought about what had happened and his plan to take over the area. He intended to capture the area, make his base there, and expand his holdings. However, he didn't expect that there was someone else in Huan who had reached the police station with a gun. At this time, the old men worked together to take care of the household, and the women grew plants. The old men strengthened the gates so that the zombies could not break in. Meanwhile, at home, little Feifei was successfully learning school subjects. Suddenly, a whole mountain of books fell onto the table in front of the girl with a crash, and the little girl became frightened. It was Lin who unexpectedly gave her the books he had found, thinking that she would be very happy. Feifei was ready to burst into tears because she had to study so much, but Lin decided that these were tears of joy. At that moment, the baby in Lin's arms woke up and started crying. Feifei's mother looked at the man in surprise and asked where the child was from. Lin replied that it was a long story, and now the baby needed to be shown to Grandma Shu, who was a doctor. Grandma Shu heard the conversation and asked that the child be brought to her quickly. The baby was unswaddled, and the grandmother began to examine him carefully. She treated the wounds and said that the baby was saved just in time. But the woman added that the child has a weakened immune system and inflammation. When asked about the baby's name, Lin replied that her name was Meng. When his grandmother asked his last name, Lin admitted that he didn't know it. It wasn't written in the diary. Then the grandmother, smiling, suggested giving the baby the surname of her savior, Lin. The hero replied sheepishly that for now she should only have a name, and when she grew up, he would tell her everything. The young woman noticed that Lin had no experience raising small children. That's why she offered to take the baby in to raise her, and Fei Fei would help. Lin smiled, thanked Li, and said that he would take the baby to his place that night. Suddenly, the old men called out loudly to Lin, and he turned around anxiously. The men reported that a huge crowd of zombies had gathered on the street. Lin immediately ran out into the street to figure out what was happening. He was very surprised where so many zombies came from, because he returned very carefully. Then Lin began to wonder anxiously if the zombies had become smarter and more cunning. After some time, the heroes observed a strange van that was making noise and collecting all the zombies. A young man was driving the van, deliberately making noise and driving slowly forward. The heroes watched what was happening from the apartment and tried to understand what was happening. Upon closer inspection, the men realized that the van was collecting zombies while the others were looking for food. Lin sighed and said that it seemed to be exactly like that. After some time, a group of survivors appeared, collecting food from stores. One of the old men, watching the camera footage, said that the van suddenly turned around. Lin became wary and began to closely watch what was happening. The van was driving straight towards the group of survivors. People got scared and realized that the driver was deliberately driving the zombies straight towards them. The driver calmly lit a cigarette and continued driving towards the survivors. He recalled how, at the beginning of the apocalypse, he left his wife and child at home in search of food. Before leaving, he said goodbye to them and promised to return soon. But soon he was attacked by zombies, and he already thought that he would die. At that moment, a van suddenly appeared. 2 armed men came out of it and started killing zombies. The boy asked to take him with them, but the men refused. Then he fell on his knees and began to beg for help for the sake of his wife and child. The hero did not expect that strangers would agree to take him and his family into their shelter. Then he thought that he had met good people, but he had no idea what horror awaited him ahead. Having learned about his wife, the men came to his house and abused her. The guy himself was tightly tied up and forced to watch what was happening. He screamed with all his might, but he couldn't change anything. When the men had had enough fun, they then threw the woman from a height. The unfortunate woman fell and died on the spot. When the hero began to threaten the killers, they grabbed his daughter and threatened to throw her down too. Since then, he has been looking for his family's killers in order to take revenge on them. Now he had no intention of leaving them alive. He drove the van at full speed towards the enemies and slammed them into the building. Lin immediately ran out to see what had happened. The old men tried to stop him, but not without success. Coming closer, Lin saw zombies trying to climb into the driver's van. Then he calmly asked them not to make noise because a small child was sleeping right now. The zombies turned and looked at him in surprise. A moment later, they instinctively rushed towards him. But soon the monsters' heads fell to the ground one after another. Lin dealt mercilessly with the monsters, gaining points and strength for each one he killed. The men watched in shock as Lin dealt with an entire army of zombies, wondering if he was even human. One of them suggested that Lin was a super soldier and would become a hero and symbol of the city after the apocalypse. After some time, the street was completely cleared of zombies. Then Grandma Shu came over to examine the survivor, as she was a medic. Lin asked how the victim was feeling. Grandma Shu replied that nothing serious had happened to him, just bruises. She added that the man received some of his injuries from the airbag and that his life was not in danger. Lin said it was good news. He then added that, after recovery, the man should clean up the mess he made. The old men looked at Lin in bewilderment, not understanding whether he was joking or speaking seriously. Soon the victim came to his senses and asked if he had really ended up in heaven. Lin calmly replied that this was not heaven, but the Yangwang residential complex where they lived. Then the hero reminded that since the man was better, he now needed to clean up the mess he had made. The man stood up with difficulty and introduced himself, saying that his name was Chen He. He added that he previously worked as a network technician. The man thanked Lin for saving him, but said that he had to save his daughter, who was being held hostage by bandits. Then Lin calmly replied that the man simply didn't like to work and was lazy and simply decided to run away. Finally, Lin said that he would go get his daughter himself and that the man would better do the cleaning. After some time, Lin was walking along the deserted streets with a little girl. The little girl happily asked if it was true that her dad had asked her uncle to come for her. Lin patted the girl on the head and replied that her father even paid 100 yuan for it. At that time, the blogger was standing by the window and saw a man with a little girl on the street. As they got closer, she recognized the same guy who had scared her at the window. The girl became angry, deciding that the stranger had kidnapped the child. Passing by a familiar house, Lin raised his head and again saw that beautiful girl in the window. He waved to the blogger in a friendly manner, hoping to win her over. The girl stepped back and thought that this man was smiling very disgustingly. Then she abruptly pulled the curtains closed. The girl anxiously thought that since the pervert hadn't gotten to her, he had kidnapped the child. She began to cry, imagining what might await the girl at such a terrible time. Lin scratched his head in bewilderment and decided that the girl had lost her mind from fear. He then turned to the little girl, deciding to warn her of the danger. He told Tintin that during the apocalypse, many people go crazy and it is better to avoid such people. At that time, in the neighboring area, a car was driving, being chased by a crowd of zombies. One of the passengers noticed a strange man with a little girl on the street. He asked to look in that direction, and the others asked in surprise what had happened. The guy replied that he saw that strange freak again. He added that now he can calmly walk with a little girl among zombies. At this time, Lin passed by a children's store, and he happily said that he wanted to buy a toy for Man and asked Tintin if she wanted one too. The boss thought that the boy and girl were in danger because of the crowd of zombies running after the car, so she ordered the driver to lead the zombies to the side and distract them. Suddenly, strange music began to sound, and the heroes became wary. It was Lin and the little girl who found a toy that sang and repeated their words. The zombies nearby immediately reacted to these sounds. They immediately rushed in that direction. A crowd of bloodthirsty monsters rushed straight towards the hero and the little girl. The driver nervously noticed that Lin had gotten ahead of them, and they hadn't had time to distract the monsters. The people in the car watched anxiously, thinking that the boy and girl had met their end. At this time, at a military base in the desert, they were actively studying a crystal extracted from the brain of a zombie. The lab technician told the professor that the crystal did not contain any substance known on Earth. Then the professor asked what he had learned about the stability of his energy. The scientist replied that the crystal shell is similar to water and at the same time stronger than skin. The professor thought with alarm that even modern equipment was powerless against this crystal. Then the professor remembered about other bases, and perhaps they managed to find out something about these crystals. He asked if reports had come in from the other bases and what they said. The scientist replied that at other bases no crystals were found in the zombies' heads at all. Therefore, he assumed that crystals were only found in special types of monsters. The professor came to the alarming conclusion that zombies are indeed capable of evolving. And if this is true, then humanity urgently needs to find a way to save the Earth before it is too late. At this time, the action took place in the city of Huan on the roof of one of the houses. One man exclaimed joyfully that he had finally found what he was looking for. He shouted that everything turned out to be just like in the comics, and the crystals really exist. The man then admitted that it was not easy, and that he killed 7 of his comrades for the sake of this crystal. Holding the crystal in his hands, he thought that he would soon absorb its power. The hero believed that he would become stronger and become the ruler of a new world, killing all the zombies and saving the world. The man's name was Jiang Hao, and he dreamed of becoming the strongest superhuman after absorbing the crystal. He immediately swallowed the crystal and waited to turn into a superhuman. The man imagined that, as the ruler of the apocalypse, he would live with a new woman every day. But time passed and nothing happened. The man became nervous and thought that the crystal was useless. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his stomach, and he doubled over in pain. The man collapsed to the ground, thinking that the crystal was simply starting to act. A moment later, blood began to gush from his mouth. Then blood started coming from the nose, ears, and eyes. The man was bleeding unconscious, unable to believe what had happened. Soon the father was reunited with his daughter Tintin. The man couldn't believe his luck, cried with joy, and thanked Lin. The woman noticed that Lin's clothes were covered in blood and asked anxiously if he was injured. The guy just smiled and replied that it was zombie blood and that he was fine. Then the old man approached the girl's father and reminded him that it was time to fulfill his part of the deal and pay the hero. The man nodded, thanked Lin, and handed him the promised money. Lin happily took the money and said that it was a normal transaction and not a reason for gratitude. The man was very surprised because during the apocalypse, money is worth nothing. As the man watched the guy leave, he thought that he hadn't expected him to actually take the money. When Lin left, the man asked the old man why he was acting so strange. The old man explained that there was nothing strange about the deals, they had an agreement that had to be kept. He added that order and discipline should not be underestimated, because they are what give hope. The second old man joined the conversation and said that they too did not understand Lin at first. But then he admitted that over time he realized how important the order that Lin maintains is. The man listened to the old men with great surprise, because it was still difficult for him to understand all of this. After some time, the heroes heard the ringing of a tower clock nearby. They realized that the sound was coming from the bell tower of the neighboring district. The heroes noted that the bell would distract the zombies and give the survivors time to search for supplies. The old people said among themselves that the one who did this was a very brave and kind person. Indeed, soon the roar of zombies was heard from all sides. All the monsters headed towards the tower from where the ringing was coming. A group of people who had arranged all this were sitting in ambush nearby. They discussed making this ringing a good daily tradition that would give time to the survivors. The female commander said that the idea was good, but this method would not work for long. Then she ordered to stop talking and quickly gather supplies, since there was not much time. Suddenly the heroes' attention was drawn to a strange noise. Upon closer inspection, they realized they were faced with a big problem. A huge mutated zombie appeared on the horizon, surpassing all the others. He crushed everything in his path, even other zombies. The ringing of the bell attracted not only ordinary monsters, but also this mutant. A moment later, the monster was already at the top of the tower. The monster began to break and destroy the bell tower with fury. The sound of the bell made the mutant very angry and brought him into a real rage. Rocks and debris from the building fell from the top of the tower. The heroes watched what was happening only from afar. They understood that among the zombies, there were already dangerous monsters that could think. The woman anxiously wondered whether humanity had any chance of survival at all. Noticing that the bell had not struck the required 12 strokes at noon, the heroes became worried. They didn't understand what had happened and whether there was any hope that everything would be okay. Realizing how important hope was in such difficult times, Old Man Wang turned to Lin and said that there was always hope. He added that the more power a person is given, the more responsibility he bears. The old man also said that alone a person is weak, but together people become stronger. He explained that this requires a leader who will unite people and give them hope. Lin admitted to Old Man Wang in confusion that he did not understand anything he said. The old man was surprised and realized that Lin needed to be explained differently and came up with a way to do it. Then the old man said that he knew a way to help the hero earn more money. He suggested that the guy invite survivors to live in their residential complex and receive an agent commission. Lin's eyes immediately lit up, and he really liked this idea. Now the old man spoke in the language of the hero. The guy immediately agreed and said that he would do it right away and immediately got down to business. The wife quietly approached the old man and asked him if he thought he had deceived the young man. The officer replied that there was no deception, because Lin really was the strongest man he had ever met. Watching Lin go, the old man said that perhaps this guy was humanity's last hope. After some time, Lin was already combing the surrounding area in search of survivors. Suddenly, his attention was caught by a strange sound coming from around the corner. A moment later, an expensive car emerged from around the corner at high speed. Lin looked at the car with admiration and thought that he would like to have such a car too. The car stopped abruptly next to him, and the driver politely offered to give the guy a ride. Lin thanked him and said that he was currently working, so he didn't need help. The man was very confused by Lin's strange behavior and what kind of work he was talking about during the end of the world. Deciding that the guy was out of his mind, the driver stepped on the gas and drove away. Lin just looked after the car and admired the car of his dreams. After some time, the passenger asked the driver if they were just going to leave the guy alone. She was worried that the noise of the car would inevitably attract zombies and that they would soon be here. The man calmly and indifferently replied that they had offered to help, but the boy himself had refused. Looking in the rearview mirror, the driver added that Lin also seemed abnormal to him. Soon, zombies actually started moving into the area, attracted by the noise of the car. These monsters were noticeably faster than those Lin had encountered before, which seemed strange to the hero. Lin reluctantly took out his weapon, thinking that he was already very tired of killing stupid zombies. A second later, the monsters' heads fell to the ground one after another. The guy soon dealt with the entire crowd of zombies. Looking at the monsters' bodies, Lin noticed that they had become faster and smarter, making them a little harder to deal with. He wondered if zombies really did evolve. Then Lin reassured himself that he had a helper system, and with each monster he killed, he became stronger. Suddenly, the guy's attention was drawn to a strange sign on the window. An SOS signal was written on the window of one of the buildings. The dancer and streamer Yan Nini was imprisoned in this apartment. The girl ran a popular blog and recently celebrated her 19th birthday. She was an excellent dancer in folk and modern dance. When the apocalypse began, the girl locked herself in the house and never went outside again. Luckily, she had enough food supplies and she ate very little, so she lasted until today. On the third day of the apocalypse, there was a knock on her door. Approaching the door, the girl heard the voice of her manager Liu Hong. Looking through the peephole, she saw her brother Liu Bing standing next to her. The girl knew Liu Bing as a lazy person, and she didn't like the way he looked at her. She was in no hurry to open the door, because she was afraid of being alone with Liu Bing. Because she understood well that if he planned something bad, no one would be able to help her. And the girl felt that even his sister Liu Hong would not do anything to help the streamer, but quite the opposite. That's why the girl still hasn't opened the door to anyone, not even her manager. But now she had run out of food, and thoughts of starvation made her panic. At this time, manager Liu Hong and her brother Liu Bing were talking on the floor below. Liu Bing was indignant that the girl still did not open the door, and rudely insulted her. The sister just listened silently, as her brother said that he wanted to get the girl, and was obsessed with this idea. The man tried different ways to make the girl open the door, but he realized that the iron door couldn't be broken. The sister sternly called her brother a fool, and said that she had warned him not to approach the girl directly. The man scratched his head in embarrassment, and replied that during the end of the world, there was no time for decency. Suddenly, the heroes heard a strange noise, and immediately fell silent. They approached the door, trying to figure out what was going on outside and whether there were zombies walking around the entrance. The heroes heard someone knocking on streamer Yan Nini's door. Hearing the knock, the girl shouted that she would not open the door for anyone and asked them to leave her alone. The persistent knocking irritated the girl, and she covered her ears with her hands. Out of despair, the girl thought about committing suicide so as not to fall into the hands of her neighbor. The girl cried from hunger and fear that the neighbor would break in on her or that she would die of hunger. Lin continued knocking, not knowing the whole story. He thought that the man inside was in danger and there was no time to waste. A moment later, he broke down the door and the iron door crashed into the room. The streamer jumped up in horror and grabbed a knife. Lin tried to calm the girl down and asked her not to worry. The streamer was indignant and asked what piece he was talking about after he broke down her door. Looking closer, Lin recognized the famous dancer streamer. He said with a smile that he watched her broadcasts and even sent her donations. The girl screamed in horror at him not to come closer, otherwise she would kill herself. Lin froze in place and did not understand what was happening. With tears in her eyes, the girl recalled films where captives were kept locked up and tortured. She didn't think she would find herself in such a situation and decided it would be better to commit suicide. Seeing her state, Lin raised his hands and said that he came with good intentions. He explained that he saw an SOS sign on the window and decided to check if everything was okay. The hero apologized at the door and explained that he thought the person inside needed help and acted quickly. But the girl didn't believe a single word he said and didn't understand how he was able to break down the iron door. The guy realized that the girl was very scared and began to think about how to help her. Lin swore he saw an SOS sign and so decided to climb up to her. He then invited the girl to move into his apartment complex, where it would be safe. To make things more convincing, Lin said that the residents of the complex help each other. He added that a doctor, a teacher, a military man, and a network technician currently live there. Lin also talked about the exercise equipment in the yard and the garden with fresh vegetables and fruits. He then added that the rental prices in their complex are quite low. At these words, the girl gaped in surprise. What other rent was he talking about during the apocalypse? Seeing her reaction, Lin was glad that the girl had stopped thinking about suicide. He was glad that he was able to save the girl from such an act. Lin said that he understood her fear because it was dangerous for a beautiful girl to be alone at such a time. Then he gently touched her hand and took the knife, saying that goodness still exists even in such a time. Taking the knife, Lin handed the girl a leaflet with the living conditions and asked her to read it. The girl took the leaflet in confusion and automatically began to read it, not understanding the logic of what was happening. Then she looked up and asked who he was, since he had not introduced himself. Lin smiled and said that he had already introduced himself, but the girl apparently forgot. He again introduced himself as Lin Fan, an employee of the real estate agency. He then said that the girl could move into their safe housing complex. After this, Lin politely suggested that they sit down and discuss everything calmly. A minute later, the heroes were already sitting on the sofa and discussing living conditions, rent, utilities, the elevator, and so on. Lin said that there was just one apartment available right now. However, the hero did not tell that the previous tenant turned into a zombie and he killed her. Instead, Lin said the girl had simply moved to another location. The blogger couldn't resist asking him point blank if everything was all right in his head. Lin was surprised by this question and replied that he only wanted to help with all his heart. He added that if the girl doesn't like his help, he will simply leave. Lin stood up in irritation, preparing to leave, but the girl stopped him and apologized. After thinking for a moment, Lin said that he accepted her apology. Then Yan gently asked if he always acted so strangely, a little abnormally. The girl added that she did not want to offend him, but was just trying to understand who he was. Lin confidently replied that it is precisely because people think that the end of the world is approaching and do not follow the rules that chaos results. The man then added that during the apocalypse, the scariest people are not zombies, but people. He said that he simply continues to live as before, observing the old order. The girl was touched by his words, and she thought that perhaps he was not so crazy. Looking at the broken door, the girl realized that she couldn't stay here any longer. So the girl said she was ready to move into his residential complex. Lin was very happy and asked her to pack her things quickly. To the girl's surprised look, Lin replied that he needed to take documents, money, and the most necessary things. He also added that the apartment would cost $1,800 per month to rent. The girl was in complete shock and didn't understand why he was talking about money. After some time, the streamer returned to the living room with her things collected. Holding her backpack on her back, the girl said that she was ready, but there were dangerous people on the floor below, and she was afraid to go. Lin assured her that they would go down the stairs safely because he would be able to protect her. The girl remembered how easily he broke down the metal door and believed him. The heroes went down the stairs. Hearing footsteps in the entrance hall, the neighbors below opened the door. Her manager's worried brother came out of the apartment and immediately scared the girl. Seeing the beauty, the man asked where she was going without even saying goodbye. He then took out a knife and ordered Lin to leave the girl with him, otherwise he would kill the guy. Lin just looked at him silently and smiled. The man got angry and asked why he was smiling. The hero apologized and said that he simply couldn't help but smile. Then, out of pure curiosity, he asked how exactly the man was going to kill him with this knife. A moment later, Lin snatched the knife from the man so quickly that he didn't even have time to blink. Left without a weapon, the man no longer looked so confident. He thought to himself that he only wanted to scare Lin with a kitchen knife and get the girl. Lin then sternly asked his neighbor if he understood how dangerous it was to swing a knife. Lin began to argue that threats alone, without serious harm, were not enough for severe punishment. He then said that in such a case, it is enough for a person to explain his mistake so that he will not do it again. The streamer watched what was happening in amazement. The neighbor was also in complete shock and didn't know how to react. Lin held out the knife and asked him not to do it again, and this time he would only get a warning. Then he warned that if the neighbor uses a knife and harms someone, he won't get off so easily. The man held the knife in confusion and didn't understand what to do. A moment later, the neighbor's sister appeared in the entrance and looked at what was happening in surprise. The streamer got angry when she saw her manager and now ex-girlfriend. She recalled that she herself helped this woman become a successful manager. But with the onset of the apocalypse, the ex-girlfriend decided to help her brother win her over by force. Lin calmly turned around and told the streamer to follow him. Then the neighbor shouted and demanded that they stop. Lin stopped calmly, looked the man in the eye, and asked what he wanted. The neighbor admitted that the girl had been teasing and tickling his nerves for a long time, and he was not going to let her go, just like that. He then stated that Lin also wanted to take advantage of the girl. Lin sternly replied that such words humiliate a woman, and that one should not judge others by oneself. Then the neighbor turned to the streamer and began to persuade her to stay. He began to frighten the girl by saying that a terrible fate awaited her with the stranger, and that dozens of men could take advantage of her. Who will take turns doing terrible things to her, and it is better for her to remain with him alone than with dozens of men. He then assured her that the safest option for her would be to stay with him. The girl replied with disgust that she would never stay with him and would rather die. The neighbor became furious and began to insult the heroes. Then he raised the knife again and rushed at Lin, out of control. Lin stood completely calm and confident. Streamer Yan screamed in horror and told the guy to be careful because he was her last hope. The neighbor's sister was thinking about how to help her brother deal with Lin and get the streamer. But her plans were ruined when her brother suddenly lost consciousness and fell to the floor. The sister immediately ran to him, checking his condition. Lin calmly replied that he had asked for it and that he was only defending himself and warning. On the one hand, the streamer was shocked by the picture, but on the other, she admired the hero's strength. Calmly putting his hands in his pockets, the guy reminded the girl that it was time for them to go. A minute later, the heroes descended the stairs, leaving the worried neighbor and his sister alone. On one of the floors, there was a pile of dead zombies lying on the floor, and Jan wondered if Lin had killed them all. He calmly replied that he had no choice. They attacked him, and he had to defend himself. The streamer was shocked and horrified by the terrifying appearance of the monsters. She had never seen them so close before. Breaking the silence, the beauty asked the guy again what he was doing. The hero calmly replied that he had already told her that he was involved in real estate at an agency. But the girl found it hard to believe that Lin was just a simple realtor. It seemed very strange to her. Walking along the deserted streets, the girl asked the guy many questions, trying to solve his riddle. Lin calmly replied that, in addition to being a real estate agent, his main job was as a security guard at the complex. The streamer was then even more surprised that such a simple worker possessed the strength of a superhero. Having learned that the guy works as a realtor, a security guard, and a part-time job, the girl was very happy with the find. After all, this was a classic set of Hidden Dragon, simple professions for an undercover superhero. Looking at the girl talking to herself and being happy, Lin thought that she had completely lost her mind from stress. After some time, the heroes had already arrived at their destination. One of the old men greeted them joyfully and was pleasantly surprised to see Lin with a beautiful girl. The old man took the boy aside and quietly praised him for communicating with beautiful girls. But the streamer accidentally overheard this conversation and was very embarrassed. The old man continued to whisper to Lin that in his youth he should communicate more with girls, since old age is just around the corner. He then told Lin to imagine what it would be like to court a girl if he were a rude old man. The old man added that the girl would have decided that he had completely lost his mind and would have sent him away. He also said that it would not be easy for a pensioner to impress a young beauty with his pension. Lin felt awkward and asked the old man to stop this conversation. Soon the food was ready, and everyone was invited to the table for lunch. Lin began introducing the new girl to the residents of the complex. First, he introduced Fei-Fei's mother, Li, and praised her for the delicious food. Little Fei-Fei ran up to the streamer, introduced herself, and said that she was very beautiful. Yan greeted the girl shyly and gently stroked her head. Lin then introduced Chen He as a net technician and his daughter Ting Ting. After this, the hero introduced the girl to the rest of the elderly residents. One of the grandmothers said that Lin brought a very beautiful girl and that he had excellent taste. The others supported her words, and the guest became even more embarrassed. Hungry Fei-Fei looked happily at the dinner, and Li invited everyone to the table. On the table were simple but very tasty dishes from our own garden, among other things. The guest began to eat with great appetite as she had not tried such food for a long time. She praised Lee for the delicious lunch, and Lee thanked her. During lunch, Yan became increasingly convinced that she had done the right thing by moving to this complex. One of the veterans asked the girl where she got water. He explained that as a former military man, he understands how important water is in difficult times and how scarce it is. The girl replied that she had been drinking tap water all this time. At first, she was afraid that the water was contaminated, but her thirst proved stronger than her fear. In the end, the water turned out to be clean and nothing happened to it. At this point, network technician Chen exclaimed that he had been afraid to drink tap water all this time. He added that he did not expect the tap water to be safe all this time. The old military man thought for a moment and said that the water comes to the station directly from the river. He suggested that the water goes through several stages of purification, so it remains safe for now. The old man added that there were probably still survivors at the station who were keeping it running. Another veteran agreed and said he thought so too. He added that this man is very important because thanks to him people have water. With his mouth full, Lin said he would check the water treatment plant later and take care of the survivors. The streamer worriedly told the guy that it could be dangerous. Continuing to eat, Lin replied that water was too important for survival, so he would check everything. He added that the survivor at the station is a real hero who needs to be thanked and brought food. Having quickly finished his lunch, Lin announced that he would head to the station right away. He then added that if anyone wants anything, courier delivery of any order costs 100 yuan. Here, the residents one after another surrounded Lin and began to say what they needed to bring. The streamer quietly asked the veteran if Lin was a super soldier. The man only smiled slightly, thinking that they themselves were also interested in this. Meanwhile, events were unfolding at the water treatment plant in the city of Huan. One of the survivors was indeed there, completely alone. Locked in the control room, he had been living in complete isolation for a long time. It was the administrator of the water treatment plant, Wang Kai. He had to eat, sleep, drink, bathe, and do all his business right in the control room. Hearing the dog barking, the man muttered that he too was at his limit. He realized that his own strength and nerves were also almost exhausted. The man was on the verge of insanity from the long isolation and desperately grabbed his head. He wanted to open the door, go outside and see the world again. He even thought that perhaps there were no zombies left outside. But then the man wondered what would happen to the survivors if he left his post. After that, he looked at the dog and began to talk to him and ask him for advice. A moment later, the door opened and the dog ran out, carrying a phone with music playing on it. This immediately attracted the attention of the local zombies, who rushed after him. When it became quiet around, the man cautiously looked out of the office. All this time he survived on dog food, but his strength was waning. However, the man understood that he could not abandon his post because the survivors depended on him. Luckily, he had a faithful dog by his side to help him. The man tied a phone to the dog's back, and the dog led the zombie away, while the owner checked the equipment. Seeing the dog's devotion, the man understood that he also had no right to give up. Suddenly, the dog's attention was drawn to one of the zombies. It turned out to be a mutated zombie, which the dog had never seen before, and it was faster than the others. The dog stopped, trying to figure out what to do. The mutated zombie immediately rushed after the dog, and he barely managed to escape. Soon the dog found himself cornered and very scared, with nowhere else to run. At that moment, the sound of a bicycle stopping was heard nearby. It was Lin, who also saw such a mutated zombie for the first time. He waved cheerfully at the zombie, trying to distract him from the dog. The zombie immediately turned all his attention to the fresh man. The guy calmly asked the monster not to get angry because he came in peace. But the zombie did not stop and rushed to attack. Lin cut him in half with one blow, and he immediately received zombie points, only more than usual, because it was an evolved zombie that had a crystal inside it. The zombie fell to the ground, and Lin said that he had warned him. The happy dog immediately ran up to the guy, thanking his savior. The dog was cuddled with Lin, and he asked to be taken to the survivors. The dog seemed to understand the request and immediately ran to the administration room, showing the way. The hero immediately hurried after the dog, followed by the usual slow zombies. Lin dealt with the approaching zombies, cutting off their heads. The guy noted to himself that the dog was very smart. Having run into the room, the dog began to look around anxiously, and Lin noticed this. The dog was rushing around the room as if he was looking for someone and was nervous. Then he ran up to Lin, as if trying to explain something, and the boy realized that he needed to follow the dog. At this time, Wang Kai himself was in the room where the water was chlorinated and purified. The man hid in the corner, fleeing from the zombies who had noticed him. He was also worried about the dog, and was afraid that without him people would be left without water. Anxious thoughts drove the man crazy. Out of despair, he kept repeating what he should do now. Suddenly the administrator heard the joyful barking of his faithful friend. Looking up, he decided it was just a hallucination. Then the man heard a stranger's voice outside the door, asking if there was anyone inside. Wang Kai couldn't believe that anyone had managed to get here alive. It was impossible for a normal person. A moment later, the door flew open with a bang. A joyful Lin entered the room and greeted Wang Kai in a friendly manner. The man decided that he had completely lost his mind and that everything that was happening was just a mirage, and he began to cry. Seeing his condition, Lin came closer and said that he was now safe. Not believing his eyes, Wang Kai hugged Lin tightly and burst into tears. The hero could not leave the man in such a state and took him to his residential complex. Food was prepared for Wang Kai, and he ate greedily, remembering that all this time he had only eaten dog food. The girls watched him in surprise and decided that rice was apparently his favorite dish. Lin overheard the girls' conversation and asked Fei Fei why Ting Ting called her sister. Fei Fei quietly replied that they had become friends and asked to be called that. The dog was also taken to the residential complex as he helped rescue survivors. The dog noticed that the owner was feeling worse, although he was still holding up in the morning. Having finished all the rice, Wang Kai sheepishly explained that he had not eaten properly for a long time. The woman responded to his words with understanding and apologized for the modest lunch. One of the old men approached Wang Kai and thanked him for saving people. Wang Kai sheepishly replied that he was just doing his job. The old man objected that it was thanks to him that the city had had water all this time. Here Lin invited Wang Kai to move into their residential complex. He added that he works in a real estate agency and can help you find an apartment. The administrator looked at Lin in surprise, not knowing what to answer. The old man explained to the guest that Lin was offering housing right in their complex. He added that rent here is inexpensive and normal life continues even during the apocalypse. Seeing the guest's confusion, the old man laughed and said that with time he would get used to it. Li said with a smile that Grandpa Wang understood Lin best. She added that her grandfather only wanted to explain Lin's proposal more clearly. Wang Kai admitted that he still didn't understand what was going on here. Grandpa Wang put his hand on his shoulder and praised him for his courage. Then he remembered his youth and the war years. The old man said that one of his comrades seemed like a weak and timid boy. But in battle, he showed true courage and risked his life for others. The veteran said that every person has both fear and courage. He added that no one knows their true capabilities until the decisive moment. Still in shock, Wang Kai listened silently to the old man and thought that he liked to talk. At this point, Lin returned to his proposal and said that he had found two favorable options for the man. With shining eyes, Lin asked Wang Kai whether it would be more convenient to pay with cash or a card. The administrator was surprised and thought that during the end of the world, no one had money. At this point, old man Wang intervened and joked that Lin had already spent all his savings since he didn't have a wife. He then suggested that Wang Kai give the money to him and he would later transfer it to Lin when Wang Kai received his salary. Wang Kai was completely at a loss, not understanding what kind of salary they were talking about. Then he decided to change the subject and asked Lin how he dealt with zombies so easily. Lin replied with a smile that he was simply very strong. The old man confirmed that this was indeed the case. Wang Kai nodded in confusion, and the girls smiled at his embarrassment. Yan thought to herself that Lin was not just strong, but a real monster. Then Wang Kai noticed that the water treatment plant needed a person every day. He asked Lin to accompany him to the station every day. Stretching from fatigue, Lin agreed to help without hesitation. Then he said that now he would like to rest a little. Wang Kai asked the veteran who Lin was and whether he was a superhero. The old man replied that in difficult times, true heroes always appear, and Wang Kai was one of them. He added that it doesn't matter who Lin is, the main thing is that he gives people hope. Then the old man said that now they had one more hero. Meanwhile, events unfolded at a military research base in the desert. During the meeting, the scientist reported that a crystal from a mutated zombie had been mined at one of the bases. She added that research into the crystal has not yet yielded results. The other scientists listened attentively to her report. The scientist then said that one of the volunteers agreed to swallow the crystal, but the experiment ended with terrible consequences. After swallowing the crystal, the man began to experience severe tissue destruction. His blood seemed to boil, and within minutes he died of blood loss. Therefore, scientists have recognized that human ingestion of the crystal is mortally dangerous. The scientist then reported that she had collected data on mutated zombies from various bases. She told about a mutant with enormous physical strength, capable of destroying everything. His muscles were so dense that ordinary weapons did almost no harm to him. Next was a speed mutant with incredibly strong and flexible limbs. Its speed reached 150 kilometers per hour. The scientist warned that if you encounter such a zombie, your chances of survival are almost zero. She then moved on to tell the story of the third mutated zombie. The third type of zombie emitted a scream of up to 120 decibels, causing pain, nausea, and attracting other zombies. According to intelligence, a few days ago the strength of his scream was only 100 decibels. In just a few days, the scream's volume increased by another 20 decibels. At this rate of development, his scream will soon be able to damage people's eardrums. In this case, this mutant will become more dangerous than the previous two. The professor interrupted his report and said that people hadn't yet dealt with even ordinary zombies, and now there were mutated ones. He asked the scientist if humanity had any chance of salvation. Scientists are worried about how long ordinary civilians can last. The events took place in one of the cities, completely captured by zombies. Sergeant Guhan, a sergeant who had come to visit his family after duty, was watching the street through binoculars. A few days after his return, the zombie apocalypse began, something he could not have imagined. 5 other survivors, including a pregnant woman, were hiding with him. There used to be more of them, but after conflicts, the group split up and no one knows what is happening with the other group now. The pregnant woman's husband asked the sergeant what was happening on the street. Guhan sighed heavily and replied that nothing good. Then he inquired about the pregnant woman's well-being. The man replied that she was feeling better, but the birth was already very close. Guhan supported him and promised to help in any way he could. However, the sergeant understood that he was neither a doctor nor an obstetrician. He also worried privately that the screams during childbirth would attract zombies, which surprised those present. Suddenly the sergeant said that he needed to step out for a while. The man anxiously asked why he was going to leave and offered to go together. Guhan asked him to stay and protect the women while he was gone. Finally, the man asked the sergeant to take care of himself and be sure to return. He added that it wasn't just zombies that were something to be wary of, and seeing that the sergeant wasn't aware of it, he decided to explain. The man then spoke about a legend that appeared after the start of the apocalypse. According to him, a mysterious ghost swordsman wanders the streets of the city. People call him the hero of Huan City and the immortal ghost of the end of the world. The sergeant was surprised and did not believe this story, considering it nonsense. Meanwhile, life in the Lin complex went on as usual. The old man saw Lin and asked him what he was going to do today. Lin replied with a smile that he would first walk around the block and then get to work. The man thought that Lin was probably the only person who continued to work. At this time, the teacher at home was giving a math lesson to the girls. Another elderly woman, Shu, was gardening. Yan approached her with the baby and offered her help, and the old woman happily agreed. Soon, a streamer who was finishing her run approached Lin. Lin politely addressed her as madam. The girl asked to call her simply Yan, as her friends do. Lin nodded, but immediately called her mistress again. Yan asked the boy why the old man constantly talked about hope and the imminent return of his former life. The man looked away thoughtfully and asked the girl what she thought about it. The girl replied with a smile and flirtatiousness that she would never have believed it without meeting Lin. And now she believes in the words of Grandpa Vanya about hope and faith in a bright future. Lin said that then she already had an answer and had faith, which meant that everything would definitely work out. The girl couldn't resist asking why he was thinking about work and money during the apocalypse. Lin calmly replied that he was trying to maintain his usual way of life. He was afraid that after the end of the apocalypse, people would no longer be able to live as before. The girl listened attentively, trying to understand his logic. She decided to herself that Lin was genuinely concerned about the future of humanity. Then the girl coquettishly asked if he had a girlfriend. Lin calmly replied that no. Then the girl admitted that she didn't have a boyfriend either, and asked if he had thought about a relationship. Lin was surprised by the question and replied that he was not interested at the moment. The streamer barely contained her anger, realizing that she had just been rejected. But outwardly she remained calm and, without showing it, asked why he wasn't interested. Lin replied that he considered himself too young for a relationship. He added that he is only 20 years old and it is too early to think about it. Lin then said goodbye and said that it was time for him to patrol the area. As he left, he added that after the houses and shops were cleared, life here would return to normal and the city would come to life again. The girl decided that Lin was truly completely focused on saving the district and the city. Then she felt ashamed that the guy was trying to save the world, and she talked to him about relationships. After some time, Lin was already patrolling the neighboring area. One of the bloggers noticed the strange guy again and wondered who he was. She thought that since he was walking around calmly, maybe there was a life hack for avoiding zombies. Lin looked out her window again and wondered if she was watching him. He wondered to himself whether the girl had gotten any better since their last meeting, when she had been so frightened. But to avoid being distracted, Lin decided to go and clear the nearest block and reached for his sword. Seeing the guy take out his sword, the girl got scared and thought that this maniac wanted to attack. At this moment, Lin tried to remember that he had forgotten something, and then he remembered that he had promised to smile at the girl every day to help her stabilize her psyche. Seeing Lin approaching with a sword, the girl jumped back from the window in horror. She was very scared that he was smiling nastily again and looking straight at her. After some time, Sergeant Guhan was looking for the necessary medicines in the pharmacy. He thought with annoyance that without a pharmacist, it was very difficult to find the medicine he needed. Suddenly, the man heard a strange growl and slow steps. He immediately realized that it was a zombie. Despite his military training, Guhan wasn't confident he could handle the zombies without a weapon, so he decided to retreat and hide. Soon, the pharmacist, who had long since turned into a zombie, emerged from the utility room. The man quickly hid before the zombies noticed him, since they are very slow until they see their prey. He was willing to do whatever it took to survive. The zombie slowly wandered around the pharmacy in search of prey. Meanwhile, Lin was nearby clearing the streets and shops of zombies. Suddenly, he noticed strange changes in his sword that were not there before. The sword called Frostmourne became even sharper and began to shine strangely. At that moment, Lin's attention was drawn to a noise outside. The zombies had obviously met someone. He immediately went out to see what had happened. Meanwhile, the sergeant fought desperately with the zombies. He was surrounded on all sides by a whole crowd of monsters. Armed with an ordinary stick, the man tried his best to fight back. He understood that his chances were almost nil, and he already regretted that he had run away from one zombie straight into a whole crowd. Lin greeted the stranger and asked if he needed help. The sergeant immediately sensed an unusual strength and military bearing in Lina. He realized that such confident endurance only appears after many years of service. Guhan thought that an experienced soldier could always be recognized by his behavior. He felt that Lin was very strong and capable of helping him. But at some point, the sergeant did not want to drag the stranger into such danger. So he ordered Lin to leave quickly before the zombies noticed him. Lin asked with a smile whether this meant that help was still needed. The sergeant looked at him in bewilderment, and the zombies had already noticed Lin. The man again ordered him to leave immediately. The sergeant was worried that the guy could have been saved, but stayed, and why he did it. The zombies immediately switched to Lin and headed towards him. Lin calmly asked them not to force him to use force in public. One of the huge zombies immediately rushed at Lin. The sergeant decided with horror that the boy could no longer be saved and that this was the end, and he blamed himself that the young man would die because of him. But the next second, the head of the huge monster easily flew off its shoulders. Then Lin calmly kicked the heavy carcass with his foot, and the heavy body flew far to the side. The sergeant was shocked, thinking that no officer he knew could have thrown the fat zombie so far with a kick. It seemed to him that this guy had stepped out of the pages of a science fiction action movie. A moment later, Lin was surrounded by the rest of the zombies, hoping to feast on fresh flesh. He pointed his sword at them and asked them to stop one last time. Lin then apologized, saying that he would have to use the power of Frostmourne, which had become more powerful. The sergeant was perplexed as he listened to Lin speak to the zombies in such pompous terms. He watched as the zombies' heads fell off their shoulders one by one. Lin single-handedly dealt with an entire army of monsters. After finishing the fight, he looked with annoyance at the blood around him and the bodies because he didn't like such a mess and cleaning. The sergeant looked at Lin in complete shock, surrounded by the bodies of defeated zombies. Then suddenly the military man remembered the story of the mysterious lone swordsman wandering the streets. He asked in horror if this was the hero from the city of Huan, the immortal ghost of the end of the world. Lin looked at the sergeant in bewilderment and asked what nonsense he was talking about. Coming closer, Lin repeated that he did not understand what they were talking about. Lin, drawing level with the sergeant on the roof of the bus, introduced himself and asked who he was. Seeing how easily Lin jumped onto the roof of the bus, the sergeant realized that an ordinary person could not do such a thing. Lin noticed that the man was silent all the time, and he wondered to himself if he was deaf. The sergeant introduced himself and said that he was an active duty officer named Gu Han. After hearing the answer, Lin realized he was mistaken, introduced himself again, and said that he lived in the Yangguang complex. Unable to contain himself, the sergeant immediately asked how Lin managed to deal with zombies so easily. In response, the guy showed his sword and said that it was a copy of a divine artifact from the game World of Warcraft. He added that it is this powerful sword that helps him deal with monsters. The sergeant, completely perplexed, asked if Lin was involved in rescuing survivors. Gerards sheepishly replied that he worked as a realtor and was looking for tenants for his complex. He then asked the sergeant if he had served in the army. Guhan replied that he was an active officer and had come home on leave before the apocalypse. Listening to Lin, the sergeant increasingly thought that he was speaking very unusually. Either it was his manner or he was not himself. Here Lin took out the documents and invited the man to move into his residential complex. He spoke in detail about the advantages of the complex and the favorable rental prices. The sergeant was amazed not only by the offer, but also by the fact that there were other survivors. He took the documents carefully and began to read them. The man thought to himself that such a strong man had probably already saved many. After some thought, the sergeant agreed to move into Lin's residential complex. But he also added that several more survivors needed to be taken along with them. Lin immediately agreed to accept all survivors into his residential complex. After some time, the heroes reached the Yangguang residential complex. Seeing a pregnant woman, Lin asked if she was the sergeant's wife. Guhan replied that her name was Yan Hui, and she was just one of the survivors. Then Lin carefully asked the woman where her husband was now. Yan Hui lowered her head sadly, and quietly replied that he was dead. Lin quietly pulled the sergeant aside and asked what exactly had happened. The sergeant sighed heavily and said that this story began in the morning, when he went to the pharmacy for medicine. After he left, Yan Hui and the others met a group of other survivors. The strangers had food supplies, and everyone was happy about this, so they asked them for help. The survivors were very happy, because at such a time any support was invaluable. But upon seeing the pregnant woman, the strangers suddenly refused to take them with them. Along with that group of survivors, everyone left, including Yang Hui's husband, who abandoned his pregnant wife. Continuing, the sergeant looked sadly at the woman, and said that upon returning, he found only her in the room. Guhan asked Lin tensely if he considered a pregnant woman a burden. Lin calmly replied that they were both his clients, and he did not consider the pregnancy a burden. The sergeant realized with relief that he had not been mistaken about Lina, and had met such a person in time. Suddenly, Yan Hui clutched her stomach and groaned in severe pain. The woman began having contractions, and it became clear that labor was very close. Then Grandma Shu ran out and asked all the men to step aside so she could examine the woman in labor. She immediately ordered that the woman be carried inside the house as quickly as possible. When the sergeant was at a loss, Lin reassured him by saying that Grandma Shu was an experienced military doctor. Yang Hui was moved to a separate room, where Grandma Shu remained by her side. All the residents anxiously awaited news about the condition of the woman in labor. Coming out to the others, Grandma Shu said that labor would begin at any moment, but the conditions were very difficult. Then she asked the men to leave and the women to stay and help her and pray. Lin understood that childbirth itself was very dangerous and always associated with great risk, especially such a birth. Noticing Lin leaving, the other men immediately asked where he was going. The hero replied that during childbirth, the woman would inevitably scream and the noise would attract zombies. So he decided to guard the entrance to the residential complex so that Yan Hui could give birth in peace. The sergeant tried to stop Lin and suggested that they come up with a safer way to protect themselves. The guy calmly replied that the danger didn't matter to him at the moment. He remembered the general's words that it was necessary to fight for the sake of future generations. Lin then pointed to the children and said that the true hope of humanity lives in them. He added that even a newborn child is a future that must be protected at any cost. Lin asked not to worry about him and said that he was obliged to ensure the safety of his residents, since this was his job. Little Ting Ting asked her grandfather which General Lin had just spoken about. Grandfather Wang said that during the Long March, a woman began giving birth right next to the enemy. Then General Dong ordered that time be gained at any cost so that the woman could give birth in peace. The soldiers held their positions at the cost of their own lives while the births continued. Grandfather Wang added that many soldiers died in that battle. Many people then condemned the general and did not understand why so many people had to be sacrificed for the sake of one child. He said that later, the general was even reproached for the decision he made. Grandfather explained to Tintin that without caring for future generations, the people would have no future. He said that not all people are capable of understanding such a battle for the future. While the women were helping the woman in labor, Lin brought out a chair, sat by the gate with a book, and calmly monitored security. Suddenly, a black car rushed down the street at high speed. Having passed Lin, the driver suddenly backed up sharply. As he rolled down the window, the man was surprised to think that he had not expected to meet such an oddball in the middle of the street. Pointing his gun at Lin, he was surprised that he was calmly reading a book while the others were hiding from the zombies. What alarmed him even more was that there were almost no zombies on the street, although it was usually full of them. Putting away his weapon, the man asked Lin what he was doing there. Without looking up from his book, Lin calmly replied that he was reading and continued flipping through the pages. Then the rear window rolled down, and the young people sitting in the car burst into loud laughter. They were puzzled by how one could read a book right on the street during a zombie apocalypse. One of the guys asked the driver how to pay attention to the well-fortified gates of the residential complex. Then he added that there might be useful supplies stored inside, and it might be useful to break in. However, looking at Lin, Hao decided that it was unlikely that there would be anything valuable in such a place. He said the guy was clearly not quite right in the head, and that it was too dangerous to get out of the car now. Friends immediately supported Hao, and began to praise him for his caution and intelligence. Then Lin calmly asked them to stop their empty chatter and leave here quickly. He explained that a birth was about to begin in the complex, and the noise could attract zombies. But his words only made the company laugh harder, and they began to loudly mock him, calling him an idiot. Lin looked up and asked not to insult him with such words that were directed at strangers. The girl in the car got angry, jumped out of the window and threatened to kill him for such words. Hao then pointed the gun at Lin again and asked if he understood what was in front of him. Without looking up from his book, Lin calmly replied that it was an ordinary hunting rifle. Hao stated that, after the end of the world, only those who have weapons have power. He continued that now he could do whatever he wanted, and no one would punish him anymore. Hao then admitted that he liked to play with people and then just kill them. He asked Lin with a grin if he believed that one shot could blow off his head. Lin calmly quoted the Criminal Code article on illegal possession of firearms. He added that it was not too late for the man to come to his senses and leave here calmly. Hao listened to Lin in complete bewilderment, not understanding why he was even remembering the laws. The others also looked at the guy as if he had lost his mind. The company unanimously began to ridicule his words about illegal possession of weapons. Smiling, Hao asked his friends if it meant he was a real criminal. The friends laughingly replied that now the law is made by Hao himself, so only he decides whether he is a criminal or not. Lin finally got tired of listening to their stupid ridicule and closed the book with a loud slam. He calmly told the strangers that they had no principles of their own and were just going with the flow. Lin added that the world was already mired in filth and they were only making it dirtier. These words finally drove Hao crazy, and he demanded that they stop lecturing him. Hao then pointed the gun at Lin again and ordered him to kneel down and beg for forgiveness. The next moment, the weapon suddenly disappeared from Hao's hands, and he didn't even understand how it happened. Looking up, the man saw that the gun was already in Lin's hands and pointed straight at him. Realizing that he was facing a very dangerous person, Hao decided to leave as quickly as possible. He stepped on the gas and tried to get away from that place as quickly as possible. His friends were puzzled as to why he was running away, since Lin still had the gun and their car was protected by armored glass. Irritated, Hao ordered everyone to be quiet and not to distract him with further conversations. Pressing down on the gas pedal, Hao silently swore to himself that he would definitely return and take revenge on the impudent man. Meanwhile, Yanhui went into labor, and her cries grew louder. Hearing the noise, zombies quickly began to gather from all sides. But right at the gates, Lin was already waiting for them, ready to meet the enemy alone. Residents watched what was happening from the balcony and were very worried about the hero. Grandfather Wang asked everyone not to lose faith and trust in Lin's strength. The children immediately supported him and unanimously said that they sincerely believed both their grandfather and Lin. The old man smiled warmly, stroked the children's heads and promised to buy them sweets when it was all over. Throughout the entire battle, Lin fought single-handedly and without stopping against the advancing monsters. With each new cry of the woman in labor, the zombies grew in number, and Lin did not have a minute to rest. Yang Hui's screams were constantly heard from the house, attracting more and more zombies to the residential complex. The women surrounded the woman in labor, supported her, and tried their best to ease her condition. Sometimes Lin would listen for a moment to what was happening in the house and anxiously wonder how the birth was going. Suddenly, someone's body fell down from the upper floors of the neighboring building. These were zombies, who one after another fell from a great height. They fell to the ground with a crash. And then, a moment later, they rose to their feet again and, having risen, immediately headed towards the hero. This whole crowd of monsters quickly rushed straight at the guy. Lin continued to defend his friends and even managed to joke, calling these zombies very determined. The residents continued to watch the hero with alarm, realizing that they could do nothing to help him. Then the sergeant asked Grandpa Wang if he wasn't worried about Lin at all. The old man answered honestly that he was worried, but still continued to believe in him. He added that Lin remains their last hope for a better future. The sergeant said that they still had to go down and help him, and he would do it. But Grandfather Wang stopped him, explaining that they would only hinder Lin in battle. The sergeant agreed, realizing that the old man's words were indeed true. He thought that going down would cause more trouble than good. At that moment, the water treatment plant administrator noticed a strange zombie on the roof of a neighboring building. It turned out to be a screaming zombie, the likes of which they had never encountered before. One of the men noticed that this zombie was not running like all the others, but was just watching everything. The administrator admitted that this was the first time he had seen such an unusual mutant. Suddenly, the screaming zombie took a deep breath and released a powerful sound wave. This scream immediately made everyone's ears pop, and a strong pain pierced their heads. The women in the house also could not withstand the sound attack and could no longer help the woman in labor. The streamer ran out of the room and shouted for everyone to immediately wet cotton wool and cover their ears. Lee asked in surprise where the streamer was going to run, but she ran out without answering. When the sound wave finally died down, the men took a long time to come to their senses and looked at each other. Lin was also stunned, but he was most worried about Yang Hui's condition. Ignoring the other zombies, he immediately focused on the screaming mutant. The hero decided that the first thing he needed to do was deal with him. Suddenly, Lin felt that something strange was happening. Zombies continued to fall one after another from the roofs and upper floors of neighboring buildings. Meanwhile, zombies from all the neighboring areas were rapidly flocking to the Yangguang residential complex. They gathered in huge crowds and moved synchronously in one direction. The blogger watched in horror as it happened, realizing she had never seen anything like it before. Before her eyes, a whole army of zombies, like obedient soldiers, moved towards one goal. The same frightening picture was observed by other survivors in different parts of the city. People asked each other in horror what was happening and whether this was real hell. Hundreds of thousands of zombies marched through the empty streets, as if following someone's orders. Lin heard the approaching horde and realized that it was probably brought by the screaming zombie. He also thought that even for him, what was happening was becoming too dangerous and getting out of control. The gates of their building suddenly opened behind him. Suddenly, someone grabbed Lin from behind and tried to drag him back into the apartment complex. It was Yan, begging him to come back inside quickly. She explained that Grandma Shu really needed his help during Yang Hui's birth. But Lin replied, confused, that he couldn't even imagine how he could help. With tears in her eyes, Yan called him a fool and admitted that she was very worried about him. Lin firmly replied that he had to stay here, otherwise they would all be in danger. Then he gently stroked Yan's head and asked her not to worry and to go back to help Grandma Shu. Then the girl asked in a trembling voice if he really wasn't scared at all. Lin answered honestly that he was also scared, like any other person, but he added that he would not back down under any circumstances. He simply has no right to do so. A moment later, the ground beneath their feet shook so violently that everyone around felt it. Following this, a power zombie appeared in the city, significantly surpassing the others in size and strength. Without wasting a second, the huge mutant rushed straight at Lin. Lin calmly drew his sword and prepared to meet the monster's attack. With one precise blow, he instantly cut the huge zombie in half. But all this time Lin was haunted by one strange feeling. He felt that the power of Frostmourne had increased significantly, and the sword was becoming more and more powerful. It seemed to the guy more and more that after each zombie he killed, his weapon became even more powerful. Lin wondered if the sword grew stronger after each monster killed, or if it was the zombies themselves. At that moment, the screaming zombie activated its destructive sound wave again. Hearing this signal, the remaining zombies immediately rushed towards the source of the sound. A tired Lin leaned against the gate and thought that there was simply no end in sight to these zombies. For many hours now, he had been surrounded by monsters, and their numbers continued to grow rapidly. The other residents watched what was happening with alarm, realizing that they could do nothing to help the hero. One of the men hugged his daughter and little Fei-Fei tightly, asking them not to watch the fight. He thought that children should never have to witness such horrors. The sergeant realized with alarm that even for the end of the world, such a number of mutants looked frightening. He remembered a movie about a zombie war where huge crowds were breaking into the city. Then he thought that in such a situation, it was better to die than to try to survive without any hope. But now what is happening turned out to be almost the same as in the film, and in some places even scarier. Unable to bear the tension, the sergeant quietly asked himself if the people had any hope left. Hearing these words, Grandpa Wang realized that the sergeant needed support. The old man said that he had already seen more than once times when everyone around him lost all hope. He reminded that as long as at least one person continues to believe, hope will never disappear. Grandpa Wang then pointed at Lin, who had been single-handedly defending the entire apartment complex until now. After this, he sternly asked the sergeant why he had given in to despair so quickly. The old man calmly added that every person is mortal, but for the sake of hope it is worth fighting to the very end. Listening to the veteran, the residents felt that Grandpa Van had now become their main support. The old man himself understood that he had to remain calm and not show his fear to those around him. He increasingly understood Lin, who also believed that he had no right to retreat. Each of the survivors played their part, trying to bring humanity closer to salvation. Suddenly, one of the zombies managed to grab Lin by the leg. Lin instantly stepped on the monster's head and crushed it with one movement. He understood to himself that the number of zombies was too great, and his powers were already working at the limit. Lin thought he had been trying to maintain hope from the beginning, but now the situation had become critical. He realized with horror that an incredibly large number of people seemed to have turned into zombies. But neither fear nor anxiety could force Lin to retreat and leave his friends unprotected. Suddenly, through the noise of the battle, he heard someone calling him loudly. It was a sergeant who wanted to offer him an important idea from the roof of the building. Guhan said that the screaming zombie was controlling the others and needed to be destroyed first. Without stopping fighting, Lin replied that he understood everything and asked the sergeant to quickly return to the house. The sergeant nodded silently, realizing that he could not help in any other way now. With each new sound wave, Lin noticed that more and more zombies were flocking to the complex. He mentally thanked Sergeant Guhan for reminding him about the screaming mutant in time. Now Lin had only one way out of this situation. He decided to destroy the screaming leader at any cost. Having dealt with the zombies surrounding him, Lin began to make his way towards his main goal. Huge crowds of monsters tried their best to keep him from reaching the leader. Even in this situation, the hero did not lose his sense of humor and thought that after the battle, he would have to clean up for a long time. Finally, Lin reached the roof of the building and immediately headed towards the screaming zombie. Seeing the approaching hero, the mutant immediately turned around and started running. The guy shouted after him that he wouldn't be able to escape anyway. The next moment, he cut the screaming zombie in half with one powerful blow, throwing his sword at it. After some time, the gates of the residential complex slowly opened and someone cautiously walked out. The water treatment plant administrator joyfully ran out into the street and announced that Yang Hui had given birth to a boy. But, seeing what was happening around him, the man froze in place from severe shock. Lin swung his sword nonstop, even though there was no zombie left around, and kept repeating, "Let them all die." He looked completely exhausted and distraught, and kept repeating that he would not let anyone inside. Then the administrator quickly walked up to Lin and carefully grabbed his hand. He said that everything was already over and there was not a single living dead person left around. The man then thanked Lin and apologized for not being able to help him in any way. Lin looked at him calmly and replied that there was nothing wrong with it because what he had done was nothing. Immediately after these words, Lin's strength finally left him and he lost consciousness, collapsing to the ground. After some time, the guy came to his senses and was surprised to find himself lying in the bathroom. Next to him sat streamer Yan Nini, who was very happy to see that he had woken up. The girl explained that he was covered in blood and dirt, so she decided to help him clean up. The hero thanked Yan and asked her to step out for a moment to change her clothes in peace. The girl sheepishly agreed and said that she would leave the bathroom right away. But the next moment, her foot unexpectedly slipped on the wet floor. Having lost her balance, the girl fell right into the man's bathtub. Blushing deeply, Yan began to hastily justify herself that it was not what he thought. All this time, the administrator stood behind the bathroom door and involuntarily heard their conversation. Tingting's father covered his daughter's ears, saying that children shouldn't listen to such things, and Grandpa Wang just smiled silently. After tidying himself up after the fight, Lin went into the room where Yang Hui was resting with her newborn. Everyone greeted him with joy, and the happy mother carefully held the baby in her arms. Lin thanked everyone for their support and noted that he had become much stronger after the battle thanks to the points. The men began to exchange playful glances, hinting that Yan Nini knew much more about Lina than the others. The streamer immediately became very embarrassed, realizing that their conversation in the bathroom had been overheard and completely misinterpreted. Then Grandpa Wang decided to stop joking and calmly said that it was time to change the topic of conversation. He then invited Lin to come and look at the baby that had been born, thanks to his protection. When Lin asked if the mother had thought of a name for the child, she admitted that she had not yet had time to do so. Grandma Shu said that Yang Hui wanted to trust her rescuers to choose her name, but she did not support the idea. She explained that a name stays with a person for life, so the mother herself should choose it. Lin immediately agreed with Grandma Shu and said that she was absolutely right. Hearing these words, Yan Hui hesitated and wondered what name to give her son. After thinking for a while, she suggested calling the baby Chu Chu for now and choosing a full name a little later. The sergeant looked at Yan Hui with sympathy, realizing that his wife was left without a husband and his child without a father. He couldn't find the right words because he wouldn't wish such a difficult fate on anyone. At this moment, Ting Ting proudly told Lin that she and Fei Fei were not afraid at all, and Grandpa Van promised to buy the girls new workbooks because the girls loved to study so much. Hearing this, Fei Fei was deeply indignant, as she did not share his love for learning at all. Lin affectionately patted Tintin on the head and said that he would also give the girls 2 sets of collections. Ting Ting happily thanked Lin for such a wonderful gift. Tintin then turned to her little sister and asked with a smile if she was as happy about the gift as she was. Fei Fei was seething with anger inside, but she couldn't show it because she didn't like studying at all. Fei Fei smiled without showing it and said that she was very happy and that she even wanted to sing a song out of happiness. However, Ting Ting immediately noticed that Fei Fei seemed a bit too tense. With tears in her eyes, Fei Fei began to sing, which noticeably embarrassed everyone nearby. Grandpa Wang said with a smile that the girls were so happy with the gifts that they even started singing. Lin added with a smile that they not only sing, but also cry with happiness, so textbooks should be given to them more often. A new morning dawned, and the residents of the residential complex greeted another day in a good mood. The elderly residents gathered together in the garden and did their morning exercises together. When Lin came down to the courtyard, the old people greeted him joyfully, noticing that he looked well. Lin sheepishly thanked them for their concern and said that it was time for him to go to work. Lin thought to himself with a smile that if they had a common chat, Grandpa Wang would probably become the chat administrator. A little later, Lin met the sergeant and greeted him warmly from the very morning. The sergeant greeted them back and said that he was going to further strengthen the fence around the residential complex. Lin praised the idea and said that after strengthening the complex would become even safer and that it was time for him to get to work. The sergeant couldn't help but recall his recent conversation with Grandpa Wang about Lin's behavior. It seemed strange to him then that Lin was behaving as if ordinary, peaceful life was continuing around him. But now the sergeant increasingly understood that it was precisely this attitude that helped people not to lose hope for the future. Coming out of the gates of the complex, Lin saw a huge number of dead bodies of slain zombies. He thought that he had a lot of work ahead of him, because otherwise the corpses would soon begin to decompose and spread a smell. By evening, Lin had managed to move almost all the bodies to a specially designated place for garbage collection. Stretching tiredly, he said that there was only a little time left, after which he could rest peacefully at home. At that moment, Lin was noticed by people driving by in a car. It turned out to be the same company he had encountered quite recently. The girl immediately pointed at Lin and told the driver that it was this guy who had taken the gun from him. The driver irritably replied that he understood perfectly well who they were talking about even without any prompting. Hao decided to himself that no matter how fast Lin was, he still wouldn't be able to escape the speeding car. Determined to finish off Lin, Hao slammed his foot on the gas and drove the car straight towards him. The other passengers immediately supported this idea and began to laugh loudly. They said that Lin must definitely pay for the disrespect he showed them. Hearing the roar of the engine and the cries of death wishes, Lin immediately realized what was happening. At the very last moment he managed to dodge, avoiding the fatal blow. Hao only became more angry, deciding that Lin had just gotten lucky and needed to try again. He turned the car sharply and rushed after Lin again. The hero did not understand what was happening and why these people were trying to kill him again. Taking out his sword, he calmly asked if they weren't tired of dealing with him yet. Hao shouted at full speed that he would definitely take revenge and kill Lin, no matter where he was hiding. The boy raised his sword above his head, realizing that it was no longer possible to come to an agreement with these people peacefully. When the car came close, he cut it in half with one precise blow. The passengers screamed in horror, not understanding how this could have happened. At the same moment, the car's safety system was activated and the airbags deployed. Looking at his sword, Lin was finally convinced that the weapon itself was becoming stronger along with him. But he still didn't understand what exactly was the source of the power that strengthened his sword. After driving a little further by inertia, the chopped-up car turned over and finally stopped. The passengers struggled out, cursing and demanding revenge on Lin at any cost. Hao, barely able to stand on his feet, walked towards the guy and began to shower him with insults. Lin calmly replied that he had done nothing bad to them, that they didn't even know each other, and that they were constantly looking for conflict with him. But Hao continued to rage, shouting that he didn't need reasons and that he would kill the impudent man anyway. He stated that the destroyed car was the last straw and whether he had any idea what he had done. The rest quietly got out of the car, approached Hao and asked in confusion what to do now. Hao shouted angrily to ask that idiot who had crashed their car about it. Lin thought to himself that in front of him was a real redneck who could hardly speak without swearing. He understood that anyone could curse when emotional, but he couldn't talk like that all the time. Then the guy decided to speak to them in a language they understood, ordering everyone to shut up and come with him to the station. He warned no one to even try to resist, otherwise they would only make things worse for themselves. The company was at a loss, and once again Hao, in a rage, rudely sent Lin away. The girl tried to stop her friend and asked him not to get involved with the guy, because he was completely crazy. Hao rudely pushed the girl away and, showering her with dirty curses like the lowest woman, ordered her to leave immediately. Then he rushed at Lin, intending to kill him with his bare hands in rage and despair. But Lin easily stopped his attack and quickly neutralized the enemy. Then Hao knocked him down and said that such people need to be sterilized in time, because they are rotten from the inside and poison life around them with their rot. The tied-up friends became noticeably frightened, began to speak to Lin much more politely, and asked where he was taking them. Lin calmly replied that he was taking the criminals to the police station, because that was where they belonged. All the bound criminals rode in a large garbage container, not understanding what awaited them next. The girl anxiously asked if he was really going to take them to the police station. The others also began to persuade Lin that it was the end of the world. The police had not been working for a long time. They realized their mistake. The second guy hastened to add that he was ready to carry out any of Lin's orders and would obey him in everything. The hero responded without any interest that he had no need for such proposals. The girl thought to herself what fools her friends were if they thought they could be of use to such a strong man. She then decided that they simply did not understand what Lin really wanted and decided to act herself. The girl coquettishly turned to the guy, asked him to look at her, and demonstratively stuck out her chest. She began to assure me that she was beautiful, sweet, and well-built, and that at such a time it was impossible to find an attractive girl. Then the girl began to praise herself, assuring that she was very good in love and capable of giving a man pleasure. Lin calmly thanked her and replied that he didn't need it at all and was not interested in it at all. Walking through the next block, the guy again remembered the blogger he had seen earlier. The girl, as usual, watched from the window and was surprised to see a stranger carrying people in a garbage container. Remembering his promise, Lin turned to the window again, looked at the blogger, and smiled at her in a friendly manner. Seeing his smile, the girl immediately closed the curtains in fear. She thought irritably why this strange guy smiled at her every time, and his face only irritated her. At the same time, the girl was worried about the people in the container, believing that this maniac was treating them cruelly. Seeing the blogger close the curtains again, Lin thought that she still hadn't recovered, and there had been no changes. After some time, he finally reached the police station. He carefully placed the trash container down and calmly told the captives to get out. He then added that he had already sent people here for re-education and hoped that they would also improve. The girl asked fearfully what exactly he had planned and how he was going to re-educate them. But Lin only waved goodbye to them and wished them to finally become good people. Watching him go, the prisoners panicked and called the boy back, trying to understand what would happen to them now. At some point, the girl couldn't take it anymore, burst into tears, and began to beg the hero to take pity on her. Suddenly, red eyes flashed in a dark corner, followed by a terrible growl. Within a second, the criminals were surrounded on all sides by zombie police officers. The next morning, in the Yangguan residential complex, the sergeant woke up with the thought that he had not slept so peacefully in a long time. But then he remembered with alarm that Lin had not returned home since yesterday. The sergeant tried to calm himself down, deciding that Lin was strong enough and he was probably okay. As soon as he remembered the guy, the entrance gate creaked loudly and began to open. Just then Lin returned. The sergeant asked in surprise where he had been all night and received the answer that he had been cleaning. The hero said he needed a little help and asked the sergeant to go with him. When he went outside, he showed the watering machine and explained that he took it to wash away the dirt left by the zombies. He then admitted that he couldn't drive and asked if the sergeant could help him. The sergeant immediately and without hesitation replied that, of course, he would help. But suddenly the officer realized that there was one strange inconsistency in this story. He asked in surprise how Lin was able to bring such a huge car here if he himself didn't know how to drive. Instead of answering, Lin calmly walked up to the watering machine and grabbed it tightly with his arms. Within a second, he had lifted the huge machine straight off the ground without much effort. The sergeant froze at what he saw and thought to himself that an ordinary person simply wasn't capable of such a thing. Grandfather Wang watched what was happening from the balcony and thought with a smile how hard-working Lin really was. Then Grandpa Wang shouted at them why they were working without music, since that's how watering trucks usually drive. At that moment, Grandma Shu approached him and said with a smile that he really loved to chat. The old man laughed and replied that he simply loved good humor and music, but of course, he couldn't turn it on now. After some time, Lin told the sergeant that almost everything had been cleared out and it was time to move on. He explained that streets that are too clean could attract the attention of people with ill intentions. While they were driving, the sergeant decided to ask Lin a question that had been bothering him for a long time. He asked him if he ever thought about his goals and what he wanted his life to be like. The sergeant remembered his grandfather's words about Lin always trying to do the right thing, even if it seemed strange. Despite this, the sergeant still had too many questions, and he could not fully understand the hero. Lin replied that he worked as a designer and earned little, but now he has several part-time jobs. He added that now his main job is security, and he also works part-time as a realtor, a courier, and has plenty to do. The sergeant tried to test the guy and said that now is the end of the world. So many people just take whatever they want. He thought to himself that he had not yet heard the answer to the main question of how Lin was going to use his power. Lin looked at the sergeant in surprise and asked if everything was okay with him, since you can't just take someone else's things. Realizing that the question had not sounded quite right, the sergeant sheepishly replied that he had been talking about other people. After some time, the heroes noticed that some unusual zombie was slowly but surely chasing them. It turned out to be another huge power mutant, which was much larger than ordinary zombies. Lin immediately stopped, got out of the car, and decided to figure out what was going on. The sergeant warned him to be careful, reminding him that this was no ordinary zombie. As Lin drew his sword, he thought that the number of mutated zombies was increasing every day. Upon seeing a living person, the huge monster immediately jumped up and rushed straight at Lin. Meanwhile, events moved to a military base located in the middle of the desert. There, another power zombie also attacked the military. The soldiers fought back with all their might, but no weapon could cause serious harm to the monster. Scientists from the control center sent a distress signal to headquarters and urgently requested reinforcements. Their forces were already running out, and the mutant managed to destroy a lot of military equipment, leaving the people at a loss. Meanwhile, Lin continued to fight the same power mutant alone. He deftly jumped onto the monster's head and tried to plunge the sword straight into its skull, but this time, the sword only went in halfway and suddenly got stuck. For the first time, Lin encountered a situation where his sword could not immediately deal with an enemy. He calmly told the monster to be patient for a little while, and then pressed hard on the sword again. After several attempts, Lin finally managed to defeat the huge mutant. When the dust settled, the sergeant immediately ran out of the car, worried about the hero. A moment later, Lin emerged from the cloud of dust and calmly said that he was fine. The sergeant was again amazed at how much incredible strength this guy possessed. Noticing his confused look, Lin asked with a smile what happened. Gu-han replied that everything was fine, although he tried to hide his surprise. The sergeant thought to himself that for the first time he found himself in the role of a person being protected, and not the other way around. After Lin and the sergeant had already left, a military vehicle drove up to the spot. The soldiers came outside to see the dead power mutant with their own eyes. They recalled that they had recently fought this zombie themselves, but were unable to do anything to it. The soldiers discussed in surprise that they had fired many bullets at the monster, but it was all in vain. Now everyone was wondering who exactly was able to kill such a powerful mutant and in what way. The woman ordered the driver to start the car and continue on his way, but the driver replied that first they needed to wait for the rest of the fighters who had not yet returned. In the evening, a military vehicle drove past the Yangguang residential complex. The soldiers immediately noticed that the surrounding area looked very clean, as if it had recently been thoroughly cleaned. Then they noticed the gate, which had clearly been further reinforced. The woman ordered no one to interfere, saying that people were defending themselves as best they could, but that they had completely different tasks at the moment. One of the officers supported her and remembered the stranger they had recently met. He was referring to Lin, who seemed like an ordinary guy, but actually caused them a lot of trouble. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, there was a quiet but insistent knock on the door of Lin's room. The guy walked up to the door and calmly opened it to see who had come. Yanini stood at the threshold, asking permission to enter, and she was dressed very beautifully. Lin noted to herself that, after the move, her emotional state became much calmer. The guy replied with a smile that, of course, she could calmly come into his room and invited her inside. After letting the girl in, Lin remembered that she was the second woman who had ever come to see him. Hearing this, Yanini became a little angry, but calmly asked who was first then. The guy replied that the first was his neighbor, who then turned into a zombie, and he had to kill her. Yanini smiled awkwardly and said that this explanation sounded rather creepy. The hero decided to himself that it was better not to tell some things, since his words frightened the girl so much. At this point, Yanini asked the guy, a little nervously, to put away the knife that was still in his hands. The man sheepishly agreed and explained that he simply decided to help cook dinner that day. The girl also felt embarrassed and thought that she was probably just too nervous. She decided that the story about the neighbor was most likely just a bad joke. Putting the knife aside, Lin asked if everything was okay and why she decided to come so late. Yan sat down and, very embarrassed, asked to buy her one thing because she had guests from Krasnodar. The guy was surprised and said that they must be very important guests since they came even during the apocalypse. Then he added that he would definitely buy something tasty for their arrival. Unable to contain herself, the girl admitted that she had not been talking about people at all, but about her period, and that she needed sanitary pads. The hero scratched the back of his head in confusion, trying to understand what we were talking about. Yan, looking down in embarrassment, named several brands and then quietly added that any would do. Lin calmly promised that he would definitely go and buy everything necessary tomorrow. The streamer thanked him and asked him to take more, because the girls would soon need it too. Meanwhile, events moved to the city's water treatment plant. The administrator, leaving the building, said that he had already finished work and it was time to go home. On his way home on his bicycle, the man thought how good it was that he had a back seat. The hero also thought that a bicycle is safer than a car because it makes almost no noise and does not attract zombies. As they passed the embankment, they noticed a boat from which loud music was coming. The administrator suggested that there were most likely survivors on the boat. Looking closer, the men saw 5 people on the ship, 3 women and 2 men. Suddenly, the administrator thoughtfully asked if zombies could swim at all. Lin shrugged and answered honestly that he had never seen anything like this before. On the way, the men reasoned that the zombies were getting stronger, so nothing could be ruled out. They also thought it would be a good idea to clean the river water as well, as it was still possible to fish in the river. Stopping near one building, the guy asked the administrator to wait outside and call in case of danger. Once inside, the hero began to choose books for the girls, because he was sure that both of them loved to study. Then they stopped at another place, where the administrator again remained waiting on the street. This time, Lin went to a baby store and bought everything the newborn needed for the first time. Finally, the men reached the supermarket, where the manager, as usual, remained waiting outside. After collecting the food, Lin went to look for the sanitary pads that Yanini had asked for. A zombie cashier suddenly appeared from around the corner. Seeing a living person, he immediately rushed straight at the guy. But a moment later, the zombie's head flew off his shoulders. The hero joked with a smile that the cashier was very responsible, but he would pay for everything at the checkout. Looking around, Lin thought that there were probably other zombies left in the store. Hearing strange sounds, the guy decided to carefully examine the entire supermarket. He hid, and then suddenly jumped towards the suspicious noise. Jumping over the counter, the hero expected to see a zombie, but what he saw was a completely different picture. A frightened boy was hiding behind the counter. Lin grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and carefully pulled him out of hiding. Noticing how scared the child was, the man calmly said that he was not a zombie, but a human. At that moment, zombies from the neighboring stores came running to the noise. They immediately burst into the supermarket where the heroes were. Taking advantage of the moment, the boy tried to escape. But Lin calmly began to deal with the monsters one by one. Seeing this, the boy froze in place in surprise. He couldn't believe his eyes, because before he had only seen people running away from zombies. Never before had the child met a person who fought monsters so fearlessly. Usually everyone ran away. Moreover, one man was now fighting alone against an entire crowd. The boy winced as the body of a dead zombie collapsed next to him. After finishing the fight, the hero approached the child and asked what he was doing there all alone. Lin was surprised to himself that the boy had managed to survive at all, even if many adults had died. Trembling with fear, the child admitted that he had come there in search of food. When asked if he was alone, the boy replied that he was, thanked them for their help, and said that it was time for him to go home. But the guy stopped him, and the child looked at his savior in surprise. The hero thought that the street was too dangerous, so it was strange that the child was walking around all alone. The boy himself decided that, even though this man had saved him, he could not trust anyone now. Then Lin offered to walk the child home. On the way, the man asked his name, and the boy replied that his name was Guzing Cheng. This last name immediately seemed very familiar to the hero. It was the name of the agency administrator who had to be killed. Lin then asked the boy with a smile if he knew what he did for a living. He replied that he worked as a security guard, worked part-time at a real estate agency, and asked who the boy lived with. The boy replied that his grandfather lived with him. After some time, they were already standing near the child's apartment. The boy knocked on the door and joyfully called his grandfather, saying that he had already returned. When he got home, he announced with a smile that he had been able to find food in the supermarket. The grandfather was very happy to see his grandson alive. But, noticing Lin entering behind him, the man became wary and asked who he was. He admitted that, after the attack by his neighbors, he no longer trusts anyone, since he himself is confined to a wheelchair. And he also thought that he wouldn't be able to cope with the young man if something happened. Seeing his anxiety, Lin calmly greeted him and explained that he was only taking the boy home. The child immediately confirmed this and enthusiastically told how he saved him and defeated many zombies along the way. The elderly man sincerely thanked Lin for saving his grandson, but he only replied that it was nothing. Then the boy noticed a lot of certificates on the wall, came closer, and noted that the boy was very talented. The grandfather proudly confirmed his words and said that his grandson was an excellent student and all the certificates were his. When the hero asked where the boy's parents were, the old man fell silent for a few seconds. The old man said that his father died saving a drowning man, and his mother started a new family and forgot about her son. He added sadly that he himself became disabled early, so his grandson had to take care of him, and not the other way around. Barely holding back tears, the old man said that the state and kind people had helped them for many years. But after the apocalypse began, everything changed. The neighbors took their food, and now the child goes out to look for food himself. Hearing this, the boy ran up to his grandfather and confidently said that he had already grown up and would definitely cope with everything. Suddenly, the elderly man leaned on his wheelchair and tried to get up. He then asked Lin, as a good man, to take care of his grandson as much as possible. The old man bitterly admitted that he was already old and sick, and the child needed an adult by his side. With tears in his eyes, he asked the boy to leave with Lin, and he himself decided to stay and not be a burden. Here the boy immediately intervened and firmly declared that he would never leave his grandfather alone. Then the child thanked Lin for his help and said that he could take care of himself and his grandfather. This scene deeply touched the hero, and he wondered why he had never noticed such things before. He realized that in times of peace, people often overlook those who desperately fight for their lives every day. Then the guy seriously said that the old man would not be a burden to him at all. He added that he is ready to help good people who, even now, have not lost their humanity and hope. Then Lin gently patted the boy on the head and said that such bright people give him the strength to live on. He added that he saw in the child true resilience, courage, devotion, and a willingness to fight to the end. The hero said that he considered it an honor to help such kind people. Then he turned to the old man and asked if he really wanted to leave his only loved one all alone. With sadness in his eyes, Lin admitted that he understood the pain of people left without family and did not wish this on anyone. He then went on to say that he himself had experienced loneliness, suffering, and helplessness and knew how difficult it was. The man added that he doesn't want anyone else to go through something like this and is ready to help in any way he can. After this, Lin asked the boy to pack his things so that they could take his grandfather to a safe place together. The grandfather and grandson thanked their savior from the bottom of their hearts. After some time, the heroes left the apartment, taking with them all the necessary things. But in the entrance, they unexpectedly ran into one of the neighbors. Without even saying hello, the man immediately asked where they were going, since it was very dangerous outside right now. The boy quietly approached Lin and whispered that it was this man who had taken all the food from him and his grandfather. The grandfather added sadly that this neighbor had stolen before, gotten into trouble, and been to prison. One day, he knocked on their door, pretended to be poor, and asked for some rice. And then he brazenly burst into the apartment, knocked the boy down, and took all their groceries. The child guiltily said that he was too weak and could not protect his grandfather. Lin calmly replied to the boy that he was very brave and did everything in his power. Then the hero looked at his neighbor and asked if he was ashamed of robbing children and helpless people. The man rolled up his sleeves and declared that he had not robbed anyone, but had simply taken what was his and advised people not to talk nonsense. As he prepared for the fight, he told the guy not to act like a hero because of the sword and showed off his prison tattoos. Having tried to push Lin, the criminal could not even move him from the spot and was very surprised. The man wondered to himself who was in front of him and why he couldn't be moved. Then he grabbed a heavy metal chair that was standing nearby. Having lifted the chair above his head, the criminal tried to hit the hero with all his might. But Lin easily parried the blow, and the metal chair immediately shattered into pieces. The criminal looked at the debris in bewilderment, not understanding how it was possible to break an iron chair. The guy then pointed to the grocery bags and asked if they were their food. After that, he took the packages and with a smile invited the heroes to go with him. Seeing them calmly leaving, the man became confused and shouted, demanding that they stop. The boy boldly replied that he got what he deserved and should not go near them again. After some time, the heroes reached the Yangguang residential complex. Local residents warmly welcomed the new people, began to get to know each other, and rejoiced that there were more survivors. The old veteran, seeing the disabled man, thought that most people would not save him, but Lin was different. He did not consider the old man a burden, and once again proved that he remains the last ray of light in this apocalypse. The new residents answered questions with a smile and gradually got to know the others. The rest of the residents welcomed them warmly and said that the more good people there are, the better. Left alone with the veteran, Lin asked to accommodate the grandfather and grandson on the first floor because of his wheelchair. Soon the other women approached the new tenants to get to know them. Handing Yanini the package, the hero said that he bought everything she asked for, meaning sanitary pads. The girl sincerely thanked him and also admitted that on days like these she had a lot of stomach pain. Lin whispered that Shu advised drinking hot water and that this could be gotten rid of during pregnancy. The girl immediately became embarrassed and wondered if he was hinting that he wanted a child from her. Unable to bear the embarrassment, Yan ran away and shouted that she was not ready yet and that it was too fast for her. The hero stood there in complete bewilderment, completely unable to understand what had just happened. Then the guy approached Li and asked her to give the young mother the things he had bought for the baby. Grandma Shu said with a smile that his future wife would be very lucky to have such a caring man. The hero joked that who would look at him in these difficult times. Noticing the little girls, Lin took out the books he had bought, expecting them to be very happy. Ting Ting immediately beamed, happily accepted the gift, and sincerely thanked Lin. The hero then walked up to Fei Fei and handed her a math textbook. He added with a smile that she shouldn't worry, because after this textbook, he would definitely buy her the next one. Fei Fei almost burst into tears, silently took the hated math textbook, and was unable to utter a word. The girl was secretly very angry with Ting Ting, believing that her friend had set her up and that Uncle Lin was a real demon. Then the boy turned to the teacher and said that now there was another child who also needed to be taught. Seeing the boy, Fei Fei thought with horror that her life would now turn into a real school. Everyone went to their apartments, and after some time there was an unexpected knock on Lin's door. Sleepily, he opened the door, saw Li and asked in surprise why she had come so early. The girl said with a smile that today was Fei Fei's birthday and asked him for a favor. Without listening to her to the end, the guy immediately declared that he would buy Fei Fei more textbooks right away. The woman replied sheepishly that this was not necessary at all. She explained that she only wanted to ask to buy a cake or ingredients to bake it herself. The hero finally got it, but he still clarified whether the textbooks were definitely not necessary. Meanwhile, pastry chef blogger Su Xiaoxiao was sitting alone at home as usual. The girl dreamed that this whole nightmare would turn out to be just an ordinary bad dream. Bored, she decided to see what was happening outside the window. To her surprise, she saw the familiar cheeky smile outside the window again. Taking out a knife, Xiaoxiao sternly asked him what he wanted here. Lin immediately said that he wanted to order a cake for a girl whose birthday it was today. The guy decided to speak quietly to himself, so as not to frighten the already frightened girl once again. The blogger was surprised by his request and did not understand why he was speaking in a whisper. She decided that he wouldn't like the refusal and that he might burst in, so she decided to play along with the maniac. The girl replied that she had a cake. Lin happily asked how much the cake would cost. She was confused, but tried not to show it. Having decided that the guy was just making fun of her, the girl didn't know what to do. She stood silently for a while, trying to figure out how to proceed next. Then she sternly said that the cake would cost as much as he brought. Overjoyed, the hero jumped out of the window and said that he would definitely come by for a cake during the day. The girl remained at the window, perplexed. Then the hero went to the city river. Taking up his fishing rod, he thought with hope that today he might be able to catch some fish. After some time, a ship with survivors sailed to the shore. Lin greeted the strangers with a smile. The men came out onto the deck and asked in surprise what he was doing there. The guy calmly replied that he was fishing and asked where they were heading. After hearing his answer, the men couldn't believe that someone would be fishing peacefully during the apocalypse. They said they were sailing to the islands, hoping to find a place without zombies. The men then invited Lin to go with them. They thought to themselves that such a young and strong guy would definitely be useful on the island. The hero thanked them for the offer, but said that he was quite satisfied with life in the city. He was glad to himself that even now he met kind and sympathetic people. At that moment, zombies appeared behind Lin. The people on the ship shouted, calling him to come to them. But Lin just smiled calmly and said that everything was fine. The people on deck thought the boy was finished and were worried that they couldn't help. Here Lin began to chop down the zombies, one by one. And everyone looked at this picture in amazement, seeing for the first time how a man fights monsters alone. The guy responded humorously that he had said that everything was fine, and then he asked if they were going to live on the islands. One of the men replied that it was true, the city was unsafe, but on the islands there was hope that there were no zombies. At this point, Lin said goodbye to them and wished them a safe journey to the islands. The men also said goodbye and advised leaving the city for the mountains. As the zombies become more and more numerous, food and supplies become less and less. At that moment, other zombies were running towards the hero. The guy thought to himself that there really were too many zombies. The men thought to themselves that even such a strong guy could not cope with so many monsters. And even if they turned around, he could no longer be saved, and they regretted that they had lost such a good assistant. After some time, the hero dealt with all the zombies and breathed a sigh of relief. The guy thought that there were more and more of them each time. The people on the ship were shocked by what they saw, because they had never seen such a strong person before. One of the men said that it would be good to team up with such a reliable ally. Meanwhile, Lee came to visit the young mother and her baby. The woman admitted that she was very worried about whether the child would be able to grow up healthy. She said she was constantly haunted by anxiety, and there was no hope in sight. Lee took her hand and asked her not to think about the bad, because everything could be fine with the baby. As an example, she cited little Meng Meng, who was once saved by Lin. Lee then said that all the residents of the complex would help the young mother, and the child would grow up in safety. After that, she said that she herself had once lost all hope. But it was her baby who gave her the strength to live and fight every day until life gradually got better. The woman then told how one day, Lin Fan appeared on her doorstep. She admitted that it was after meeting him that she once again believed in a happy future. Lee added that children are the future, and for their sake, she is ready to sacrifice even her own life. The young mother sincerely thanked her for her kind words. At that moment, there was an unexpected knock on the door of the room. It was Lin who came and brought the food he had obtained today. He said he caught some fish for soup and ordered a cake for Feifei's birthday. The woman thanked him and asked him to take the food to the kitchen, promising to cook everything later. But the guy replied that he could handle everything himself and she shouldn't worry. After he left, Lee told the young mother that everyone around her genuinely cared about her and the baby. The woman thanked everyone again and thought that they treated her like family. Left in the kitchen with the fish, the hero suddenly realized that he didn't know how to clean and cook it at all. At that moment, Lee entered the kitchen and offered to teach him. Coming closer, the woman unexpectedly pressed herself against him, which greatly embarrassed the guy. She said shyly that she couldn't be as useful as Lin, and that she only knew how to cook. The hero was also embarrassed, although he tried not to show it. He replied that her help was very important, because she was an excellent cook. Feeling Lee press against him, the boy thought she was trying too hard to be helpful. Unable to bear the embarrassment, Lin took a step back and said that he urgently needed to go to the water treatment plant. Looking after him, Lee quietly laughed and thought to herself how sweet and funny he was. The action took place in the city on the roof of a building. The men stood on the roof and discussed how else they could strengthen the security of the residential complex. The technician was surprised that an experienced military man was asking him for advice and admitted that this was not an easy task for him. The sergeant explained that he had heard about his experience working with networks and was hoping for a good idea. The guy thought with embarrassment that he didn't even have a higher education since he was just installing the internet. Meanwhile, Lin was already racing towards the station on his bicycle. He still couldn't forget the awkward moment that happened in the kitchen. Suddenly, his thoughts were unexpectedly interrupted. It was the administrator who was going with him to the water treatment plant. Noticing Lin's thoughtfulness, the man asked him what he was thinking so deeply about. After some time, the heroes reached the water treatment plant. Coming closer, Lin noticed something strange and asked if the gates were really closed yesterday. After thinking for a moment, the administrator replied that he remembered the gates being closed and suggested that the wind had opened them. But Lin confidently said that he closed the gate himself, and something was clearly wrong here. The administrator then suggested that someone else might have entered the station. The hero replied that first it was urgent to inspect everything and check the equipment. Then he asked the man not to leave his side for a single step. Opening the gates, the hero saw with horror that the station was teeming with zombies. The noise from the gate immediately attracted the attention of the monsters, and they turned around sharply. Having noticed living people, the zombies immediately rushed straight at the heroes. Lin wondered in surprise where so many monsters had come from, since he himself had recently cleared everything out. Did someone really bring a whole horde of zombies to the station on purpose? Having killed the last zombie, Lin breathed a sigh of relief and said that now they could get to work on the equipment. But then the administrator came out and said that he had already checked everything, and the equipment was fully functional. After these words, Lin thought even more deeply. If the attackers didn't want to damage the equipment, then why did they bring zombies here in the first place? Suddenly Lin remembered something, told the administrator to get ready immediately, and they left immediately. By evening, the action moved to the Yangguan residential complex. At this time, the children finished their classes and began to disperse to their apartments. The teacher was delighted with the efforts and successes of her little students. As they parted, she said that they would see each other again today, which greatly surprised Fei Fei. On the way home, the girl decided that the teacher wanted to talk to her mother about her studies. Returning home, Fei Fei immediately began to take off her shoes and tell her mother how her day went. Suddenly, the rest of the residents came out from behind the woman and joyfully greeted the girl. Fei Fei asked in surprise what was going on here. Mom reminded me that today she turned 9 years old. The woman then pointed to the cake that Lin had brought. The girl's backpack fell out of her hands in surprise. Unable to hold back her tears, Fei Fei began to sincerely thank everyone gathered. Everyone congratulated the birthday girl and wished her happiness. Fei Fei didn't believe that even during the apocalypse one could experience such joy. They lit the candles on the cake and everyone sang a congratulatory song together. Suddenly, Lin's mother asked him if there would be any problems because of such noise. The hero calmly replied that there was no need to worry, he would ensure safety. The zombies wandering nearby immediately reacted to the noise. The monsters rushed to the gate and began trying to break it down. In the midst of the celebration, Lin said that he would be back soon because he had something to do. The administrator smiled and suggested that the hero had gone to deal with the zombies to add to the fun. The streamer immediately nudged him with her elbow and asked him not to say that. At this time, a military vehicle was driving past the residential complex. The military noticed movement ahead and tried to figure out whether it was a person or a zombie. They decided to be careful among themselves, as it could be a trap. Taking a closer look, one of the men suddenly recognized the stranger. He shouted loudly that it was that same strange psycho from the library. The man recalled how a stranger asked him to register for medical books. The military couldn't believe that this guy was still alive. Then their commander remarked that no madman could have survived for so long. After this, the woman ordered not to approach Lin and not to make contact with him. Having dealt with the monsters, Lin soon went upstairs to join the fun. And he came in with a gift box, saying that it was a gift from all of them. The girl thanked him and happily ran up to see what was there. But suddenly the little girl stopped and thought and was in no hurry to open the door. It suddenly dawned on her that if this was a gift from Uncle Lin, then it would be math textbooks again. Tintin's friend was impatient to find out what was inside and asked the birthday girl to open the box quickly. And I was very surprised when Fei Fei said that she wanted to give this gift to her friend. Stopping in front of the box, Fei Fei was in no hurry to open the gift and was a little afraid. But, having opened the box, the girl was pleasantly surprised by what she saw. Inside was the cutest toy dog. Fei Fei happily grabbed the toy and began to thank everyone for the gift. Lin said that you need to press a button, and the dog will start reading poems for you to memorize. Hearing this, Fei Fei thought again that Uncle Lin was turning everything into study and was a real monster. The girl burst into tears again, and Lin decided that she simply loved to study. Mom asked with a smile how Fei Fei could love studying so much if her grades weren't the best. Then Tintin suggested that they learn poetry together, because she really enjoys it. After these words, Fei Fei began to cry even harder, deciding that everyone was deliberately tormenting her. Meanwhile, the action moved to the auto repair shop on the second floor. The heroes took a short lunch break and talked among themselves. They said that now only the strongest survive, and the old rules no longer apply. One of the men said that he used to be a car mechanic and didn't think the world would change so much. He admitted that what scared him most was the cruelty of people during the apocalypse. The man thought that he survived only because he did not change his principles. He understood that even though he was the eldest, his main task now was to drive the car, and the eldest made the decisions. Now their team consisted of 4 people who always supported each other. Breaking the silence, the elder listed places to avoid. She warned against going to the hotel area, where a dangerous group of survivors was fighting for power. The woman then reminded them that their car was the mainstay of the entire team's survival. She also banned entry into the Shanshui area, where a gang leader nicknamed Mad Wolf rules. The woman continued to talk about the dangers of the area, and the others listened attentively. The men noted to themselves that their commander had a surprising combination of beauty and intelligence. After finishing her lunch, the woman also remembered the dangerous Hengji residential building. She said that the survivors there had long since lost their minds. She ended by adding that she suspected local survivors of cannibalism. Night had fallen, and the heroes were calmly preparing for bed. Suddenly, the glass in the building shattered with a loud crash. Everyone rushed to the window in alarm, trying to understand what had happened. The elder immediately recognized Wang Defu's crazy wolf people. The men asked anxiously what they wanted. The mechanic grimly replied that the bandits had come for their car. Driving down the street, the thugs shouted through a loudspeaker that they were buying up all kinds of junk and household appliances. The heroes understood that after such a meeting, no one would let them go alive. Zombies started running from all sides to the loud sounds. The monsters grew in number and quickly surrounded the area. Noticing the huge zombie, the eldest immediately became wary because they had already met him before. The men realized they had been set up and could not believe such human cruelty. The elder ordered to stop panicking, quickly pack things, and leave immediately. The day after the birthday, everyone was in a great mood. Residents of the complex greeted each other joyfully. Grandma Shu asked Lin to bring more seeds for the garden, and he immediately agreed. After this, the hero immediately went to fulfill her request. Driving past a scooter shop, Lin remembered that he had always dreamed of owning his own scooter. But he understood that such transport would create too much noise and would attract zombies. Lin himself was not afraid of zombies, but for the other residents of the complex, it was dangerous. Suddenly, the hero heard a strange sound behind him. Turning around, he saw a boy with a sign in the window. It contained a plea for help and a message that there were other surviving children inside. The hero scratched his head and thought, why write about children if he is not interested in them at all? He is not a pervert after all. But then I decided that it would be better to go up myself and see what happened there. As he climbed the stairs, the guy saw many dead zombies around him. Looking at the headless monsters, Lin wondered if it was really the children who had dealt with them. Having knocked on the door, the hero became wary and decided to be as careful as possible. A frightened boy opened the door and asked in a trembling voice to come inside quickly. Entering the apartment, the guy calmly told the boy not to be afraid because there were still good people left. Lin didn't believe the child in his heart and decided to play along with him for now. Suddenly, the boy sharply extended his hand straight towards the hero. Then he looked angrily at Lin and said that now he was caught. Taking out a knife, the boy suddenly rushed at him, screaming for him to die. Licking the knife, he said that soon the man would bleed to death, weaken, and die before his eyes. The boy then admitted that he enjoyed watching people suffer and got great pleasure from it. Lin looked at him in surprise and calmly asked why he was poking a knife into his clothes. The boy looked at the hero again carefully and did not understand why there was no blood. Then he grabbed the knife again and began to stab furiously. The guy just thought that he felt sorry for his clothes because of such a stubborn boy. He understood that his body was already so strong that an ordinary knife was not scary to him. The boy could not understand why the blade did no harm at all. Taking a closer look, Lin asked if the person hiding behind the child was an adult. He chuckled and asked how long ago the hero realized this. Lin was convinced that his guess was correct and that everything here was not so simple. Then he replied that he understood everything immediately from the overly mature voice of his interlocutor. At that moment, men appeared behind the short man and asked Sun Xiang why he hadn't killed the stranger yet. He replied, confused, that no matter how much he stabbed, the man did not get any wounds. The thugs began to discuss how their bait with the boy had always worked well before. One of the men ordered them to stop talking and suggested simply beating the stranger to death. The hero calmly asked them to come to their senses before they had time to regret it too much. Lin then warned that their weapons would not harm him and that the fight would end very badly for them. The men looked at each other and decided that the guy was talking some strange nonsense. Another bandit added that the stranger was behaving too brazenly on their territory. After these words, the thugs raised their weapons and rushed at Lin with shouts. Within a moment, the men regretted their decision to attack this stranger. The dwarf stood in complete shock, not understanding how the hero had defeated several people at once with one blow. Lin calmly leaned towards the dwarf and reminded him that he had asked not to force him to defend himself. Then the hero said that the dwarf must also answer for his actions, and hit him. The powerful blow caused the dwarf to bleed from his mouth, and he realized that he was facing a real monster. Suddenly, Lin smelled a strange smell of blood in the room. Looking around, the guy realized that the smell was coming from behind the closed door. Then he went to the door and decided to check what was inside. There were a lot of bloody people behind the door. The hero saw dismembered bodies all over the room and realized that the bandits were feeding on people. The guy thought with horror about the extent of madness a person could reach. Suddenly, the dwarf barely moved and quietly asked for mercy. Returning to the dwarf, Lin said that he had changed his mind about leaving him alive and would return every knife blow to him. The action took place in the residential complex of one of the groups of survivors called Shan Shui. Subordinates reported to their boss that the plan to lure out the survivors with the help of zombies had failed. They explained that they had been sitting in the car for a long time, and when everything went quiet, the zombies lost their target and began to disperse. Then they said that the same iron beast followed them, and they immediately followed it. But their machine turned out to be much weaker and would not have lasted long against such a crowd of zombies. Therefore, the subordinates said that they were forced to retreat in order to stay alive themselves. Mad Wolf thought that these people were very lucky to have escaped such a horde of zombies. The leader then said that this car must be obtained at any cost because it would give them a huge advantage. One of the subordinates nervously added that he had to tell about another strange zombie. He explained that it was almost the size of a mountain, had incredible strength, and could easily throw cars. The Mad Wolf asked him again if he was sure he hadn't mixed anything up, and his subordinate firmly confirmed his words. The other bandits also confirmed their comrade's story. They added that if such a monster attacked their area, they would not be able to cope with it. The men then began talking again about their plan to take over the neighboring areas and become the most powerful group. The leader said that one big gang was not enough. They also needed a truly impregnable base. He remembered that he used to be a criminal and could not freely do whatever he wanted. The Mad Wolf chuckled and said that now everything had changed and the old laws no longer applied. Continuing his speech, he described how they would rule after capturing the remaining areas. The leader then added that only by sticking together could they become truly strong. Everyone unanimously supported their boss and began loudly praising him and his genius. Suddenly, in one of the city's districts, a loud explosion thundered and a large building caught fire. Observing the fire, Lin assumed that the explosion occurred in the industrial area of the city district. The loud explosion woke up the children, scared them, and they started crying. Their screams could be heard throughout the area. Worried that the baby's cries would attract zombies, the hero immediately went downstairs, thinking it was better to be on the safe side. As he expected, zombies had already gathered near the gate and were trying to break in, so he decided not to delay. The old men noticed Lin and immediately asked where he was heading, of course guessing his intention. The guy calmly replied that there were only a few zombies for now, but there would be more of them soon, so they needed to act now. Before leaving, the old man asked the boy to do one errand and promised to pay him 200 coins for it. Lin immediately agreed and said that he would definitely do everything and hurried outside. The veteran then added that Sergeant Gu Han would be riding in the car with him. The hero nodded and first went to clear the area of zombies gathered near the complex. After some time, the young people were already driving around the city in the veteran's car. On the way, the men talked about life and how the apocalypse changed people's destinies. Guhan said that in movies, everything usually starts with the leakage of a dangerous virus. But, in his opinion, everything is arranged differently here, because zombies must constantly eat something in order to exist. He also mentioned the screaming zombie and said that its ability to evolve looked very strange. Therefore, the officer suggested that the cause of what was happening was much more complex than a common virus. Lin calmly reassured him and said that he would soon clear the entire city of zombies, and then the entire world. But the sergeant replied that the guy was taking it too lightly, since there were millions of residents in the city who had become zombies. The hero smiled confidently and said that nothing is impossible for a persistent person. Meanwhile, the action moved to the city market. After getting out of the car, Lin asked the sergeant to honk the horn loudly several times. The guy explained that he wanted to make noise to lure all the hiding zombies out, since they like to hide. He then added that after this, he would be able to go about his business in peace. Having understood his plan, the sergeant immediately began to honk loudly, attracting the dormant monsters. Within a few seconds, zombies, who had been hiding in different places, began to come out in response to the noise. Lin asked the sergeant not to stop, to drive around the block a bit and come back for him later. A moment later, the hero rushed into battle and began to quickly destroy one zombie after another. A man was hiding on the second floor of the store, watching what was happening in horror, seeing such force for the first time. After some time, there was not a single living zombie left around. Guhan thought to himself that with such strength, Lin would become a real super soldier.